All right, and start recording in three, two, and one. Oh, hey, and welcome back to the Reserve Squad Midweek Show, soccer podcast covering all things in the EPL from a bench perspective. I am your host, Ben, and I have been away for a little bit. We just had the international break, and I didn't really think I was going to do one, and then I kind of forgot it was the first game with Pochettino, or the first couple of games with Pochettino. But even before that, uh, there was some news that broke out with England that I figured I should probably touch on a little bit. So Thomas Tuchel was named the new manager. A bit mixed, to be honest, because I didn't feel like his last run at Bayern Munich was that great. It is kind of funny because there were a lot of reporting that seemed to suggest if Man United were to get rid of Ten Hag, Tuchel probably would have been the first person they would have called. Uh, but that said, even with the Bayern run, they still won a Bundesliga title, though they nearly threw it away to Dortmund. They did make the Champions League semifinals last year. He does have rapport with Harry Kane, and Harry Kane had one of his best years of his career last season in the Bundesliga. So, I mean, they easily could have made the final. There was that crazy game in the semifinal last year at the Bernabeu. They nearly could have been it. It could have been Dortmund versus Bayern in the finals, which would have been pretty wild. I do want to say he's not Southgate, and one of the things that he is very known for is being very tactically savvy. He's very good with his game management or adjustments in second halves. Another thing that's very interesting is you look at how he's played with PSG, with Chelsea, and with Bayern Munich. He's played a number of different styles, so he doesn't necessarily have a set way. Whether it's going to be a back three, he played with a back four with Bayern Munich. So it is going to be interesting to see how he adjusts or how he like looks at this England team. It's going to be very interesting to see who he calls up because everyone knows England made the finals last year, but a couple of big names were not included in that team. Jack Grealish being one, uh, Marcus Rashford being another, Raheem Sterling, who has since moved to Arsenal. Now he is maybe getting up there in age, so maybe he's not going to be in the cards. But we're going to see how this evolves. So it's going to be interesting to say, nonetheless. And the one area that Southgate did fail over and over again were those adjustments, especially in second halves when it seemed like he was always too late to make subs when maybe he had a game in his hand and just allowed other teams to kind of get through him. And the other thing you can say is this England team is very good. As evidenced by the number of finals and semifinals that they've reached since basically 2018 or so. Uh, However, it does feel there has been a bit of a theme, whether regardless of again, it's been Southgate the whole time, but there's been a theme really regardless of who's been in this side that they have struggled to play through, play from the back from the center backs and also in midfield. Now, I don't necessarily know if it's just a Declan Rice problem, which I have kind of theorized, but maybe even not. Even before then, they seem to have struggles a little bit with that. Now, do you really need that in the international game? The international game is about really vibes. And basically, it's about making adjustments late in games, like I mentioned, and just having guys to take their chance when it comes. You don't necessarily need to dominate a game, but you have to look at the goal here. Probably is for them to lift a trophy, and you have to look at who their competition is going to be in a couple of years. Spain are quite strong, as we just saw. It doesn't make sense that they're not going to be at least where they were when they won the Euros over England. Now that game was kind of close, uh, but Lamine Yamal was like 16 or 17 years old for that final. Nico Williams, who ended up getting the first goal, I think was only 21. So it just feels like that team. Maybe Rodri. We don't know how he's going to recover with his injury, but we just saw what Zubimendi was able to do in that second half for them. So just feels like that team is going to still be there no matter what. Feels like Argentina just continues to get stronger or continues to be as strong as they've been for the last couple of seasons as well. You imagine they're going to be there. France is France. You never know how well they seem to just kind of show up and never really play that well, but always find themselves in the mix as well. We'll see how Mbappe moving to Madrid, how that kind of changes how he plays for France. Whether or not he's going to be stuck on the left, or maybe he does learn to embrace being the number nine that they have so lacked the last couple of or the last like tournament, I guess. Before it's been Giroud, or they tried Benzema, that didn't necessarily work either. Giroud was kind of like the glue that kind of made everything together. To be honest, it feels like they've also mentioned how Griezmann's not going to be. I think he's announced his retirement from the national team as well. So that France team maybe is going to have a facelift a little bit as well. But you've got Bradley Barcola, coming in. Yeah, that France team is still probably going to be there as well. So that is kind of where England is going to kind of see themselves at. One thing to praise Southgate, because I have bashed him a little bit, is he nailed getting keeping a team with good spirits, getting a tournament. A lot of it is the duration of it can be distracting. A lot of England caps in the past, a lot of players have spoken about how they were not necessarily great environments. They were clicky, clicks. The Manchester players played with Liverpool, Chelsea players, things like that, or London players played, or hung out together versus the other side. Another thing too is you can praise Southgate for actually including some of the guys that weren't necessarily on the quote unquote big six. He invited people from Crystal Palace. It didn't feel like he necessarily shunned people that went out and played outside of England. Maybe Jadon Sancho not included. Well, I think Jadon Sancho moved back to Man United since then, but uh, so that's kind of where we see this here. And one final thing to kind of say is I was a little bit surprised we didn't see them maybe roll a little bit with Lee Carsley a little bit more. But that said, there was a limited window here. You don't really have a ton of time to necessarily get with these players because you've already been through another couple of international breaks. There is going to be one in November, and that I guess is going to be when we finally see him take charge for the first time. So. Uh, the last thing to kind of talk about here is I was kind of thinking, stick with Carsley just because he's actually won a trophy with England. He won with the U21s, and that basically is what Spain did. Spain probably didn't maybe want uh, the De La Fuente when he took over, and yet you look around and having success at the youth level, especially having players with having a rapport with those kind of players, it sometimes can carry over to the senior level. And we did see Carsley. The first thing he did was he brought in Angel Gomez, a player that a Man United youth product that since has moved on to playing for a team in France, and he's a young player as well. Bit a big, not necessarily the kind of build you would normally expect for a midfielder to play, kind of a holder or kind of a central midfielder, but he's quite good at getting the ball. He gets the ball on the turn, and he's a bit like Kobe Mano in that respect, but he's got an eye for a pass. I think he's a little bit better tempo setter. And we saw him immediately, come in. So that was interesting. We saw, another thing that Luke Carsley did, his first kind of act was he played Trent Alexander-Arnold at right back. He basically played him every single game. And that was kind of another thing too. Southgate never knew how to play Trent Alexander-Arnold, and I think that was maybe another kind of negative to his kind of I guess reputation, or when people kind of write what happens. But people are upset for other reasons that he's not English enough for them, and at the same time, I feel like it's time to grow up and look outside the box. I don't think Tuchel's going to be someone that's not going to understand, UK culture, being a coach at Chelsea. I did, someone mentioned Carsley, Graham Potter. I feel like maybe would have been a good set. Eddie Howe was another name that was thrown around, but there really aren't that many names that have been, not many options for English coaches. Now, some of that has been. It is kind of hard for them to kind of get a game get going hired to part of the the quote unquote bigger six, the bigger name clubs. One thing that is interesting to me is not enough have really gone out and try to manage in other cultures or in other leagues. So I feel like that's been kind of set in the back as well. Maybe the way the FA has done isn't necessarily great either, but One thing or another, and I guess the other thing that's kind of out there is no foreign coach has ever won a World Cup. But that said, if you when you look at the names at who would have been on the kind of wish list, it probably would have been Pep, Klopp, and then probably would have been Tuchel as the third name. For enough, maybe Pochettino would have been up there as well, but we ended up getting him. So I don't know. Also I think it's very hypocritical where a lot of people that are upset that Tuchel was named and it wasn't someone that was English. Some of those people even did articles even beforehand saying the FA should do everything they can to get Pep Guardiola. So there you go. Uh, so uh, so that's kind of where we end with that. So I mentioned, the two Anglophone countries have hired two ex-Chelsea managers, so that's kind of funny. So I mentioned Pochettino, and we do get to the U.S. Kind of what they did in their friendly roundup, and was a bit of a flop. Not gonna lie, we did see some wrinkles though. We did see a back three in possession. It worked very well with Canada. Or versus Panama, but Panama didn't really press us at all. The midfield pivot with Buzio and Aiden Morris was different, so I like the idea of experimenting. And again, it worked. It worked very good for versus Panama. Versus Mexico, not so much. So we'll get to the positives before just all of the negatives. Mark McKenzie got another shot. Him and Tim Ream looked pretty good as well. And I think the only negative here is Mark McKenzie was maybe had fitness issues or was dropped, wasn't able to go versus Mexico, and I think that really did hurt us because Miles Robinson played instead, and man, did he not have his best go of it versus Mexico. Uh, Another thing too is I'm downplaying Panama, but Panama also is the team that knocked us out in Copa America, red card or not. They were playing well. That game, either way, and not to go back to do redo history. I'm still kind of convinced the as bad as the red card was and playing down a man, we even scored the first goal, I believe. We scored a goal. I don't remember if it was the first one or if it was the tie. But the main thing to me was Matt Turner getting injured and having to go out because Horvath or whoever the second guy came in had two big stinkers, and that's basically the reason why Panama was able to get their goal, from what I remember. A couple other experiments we saw Musa try it on the right and didn't really love it, but hey, friendly again. First game of charge, time to do some experimenting a little bit. You don't really have, you didn't have Tim Weah. We don't really have anyone to play on that right side. To be honest, I'm wondering if maybe the idea could be Christian Pulisic, because he's been able to do a job there for AC Milan. Uh, so when we don't have Tim Weah, that's kind of an issue. Another thing too, we didn't have Florian Balogun because he ended up getting hurt right before the camp, and those two players, Weah and Balogun, Weah is the person that got the red card in versus Panama. Going back to him, you just see how important they actually are in the team because without them, this team doesn't have any runners. Maybe Haji Wright, Pulisic is too ball to feet, to me, to be honest. Now, even they're missing Gio Reyna as well, but Gio Reyna is likewise. He's kind of be a creator, ball to feet kind of player, not someone to make runs off the ball. We have Anthony Robinson to do it from the fullback side, and we were using his runs. I think actually that's how we get the second goal. Uh, and or there's I think Robinson makes a run and then passes it to Pulisic, who makes a run towards the byline. Then his cross finds basically Musa for a tap in, and then Pepe ended up getting one late to make it 2-0. It was interesting to see Pepe not necessarily start, so I was a bit surprised with that. Josh Sargent was another that ended up getting a shot, and he did have a moment and wasn't able to take it, and it is kind of unfortunate. I mean, the second half of this Panama game was a bit weird. Panama did have a couple breakaway chances, so we had to put out some fires there. So I do think Mark McKenzie had a pretty good game. Panama shot us, to be honest. I think it was 13-11. A win is a win, but again, it's nothing to necessarily overhype. And then after that, a couple of guys left out the camp. So we, mentioned Pulisic, and Pulisic ended up going back to AC Milan. Now, this upset a lot of people on ESPN FC and Fox. Lexi Laws did a nice little rant about it. I want Pulisic to be healthy, so I didn't really care. And apparently he was dealing with some tiredness or whatnot, and we just saw what he did for AC Milan in their most recent Champions League game. But we're without a lot of people, coming into this camp. We're still without Dest. We have to remember that. So we don't really necessarily have an idea for right back. There was a guy that played very well. I think was it Mossy. Uh, that ended up, kind of starring for in the last window, but apparently Fozzie Mozzie, or it's a very interesting name. He has like crazy hair. I thought he was quite impressive as well. He's 27, so it's taken a while for him to even get a start. But apparently he wasn't able to attend this camp either. So without Dest, the backup to Dest is Joe Scally, and Joe Scally to me isn't. I don't necessarily love him at right back, and we saw him actually really struggle versus Mexico without Weah, without Balogun Gio as well. And you go into Mexico without Pulisic, and so it's a lot of our main guys that we're missing, that we normally use to go into to attack with. And so two ways to kind of look at that. Yikes! Or it was a chance for a lot of these B squad guys to step up and show that they should be in consideration for more future A team spots. And we got our answer to that a little bit. We do not have a whole lot of depth to our when our A guys miss out. We looked thoroughly lost versus Mexico. I mean, the midfield was non-existent. We seemed to be pressing high with basically two. So we had Josh Sargent, but basically Brendan Aronson, and Mexico were just able to triangle pass around that with ease. Our back line was really, really deep. The midfield was stretched. I didn't really love it. So that wasn't great. We couldn't really turn them over, and I just thought we couldn't really hold on to the ball either. They were actually they had no fear pressing us, and Sargent was getting bullied off the ball. He couldn't hold on to it, so that wasn't great. Brendan Aronson couldn't beat his man to save his life. Musa, played on the wing again. He's not really a 1v1 specialist, and it just never felt like there was any kind of threat or danger there. There was one time when I think Musa won the ball off someone, and I think Brendan Aronson maybe had Josh Sargent that was open for a run, and Miss Harrison basically mishit the pass. And that was kind of the only chance that we really had. I don't think we even ended it with a shot on goal in that second half. But to me, the bigger problem was also how the back line looked under pressure. And so I mentioned how, uh, you know, Miles Robinson didn't necessarily look great. Tim Ream, unfortunately, he ended up, not necessarily doing great. I think he was maybe at fault a little bit for their second goal that they scored. Joe Scally is not normally, he's basically the starting backup when we don't have Dest, and we haven't had Dest for a little bit. Whether or not red cards or his injury. So you look at that. Ream. A lot of people wanted Miles Robinson to actually, they start over Mark McKenzie, even before, going back basically 2 years or 3 years ago for the World Cup before Robinson got hurt. So, that would have been, before Richardson's as well. But people have looked at Miles Robinson as kind of being maybe the next guy that steps up with maybe Robinson and Richards. And I haven't necessarily seen it. I think maybe Robinson needs to leave the MLS and go somewhere else. It just feels like maybe he can do something defensively, but it just feels he was very uncomfortable when he had the ball at his feet. Now it is worth mentioning the ground apparently wasn't necessarily that great. It was bumpy. Uneven surfaces is what they were saying. Divots. The environment, I guess, wasn't necessarily great, but I mean, who cares? You got to suck it up. They had to play the same way. Uh, they had a plan, and it worked pretty well. They pressed Turner when he got the ball. Turner wasn't able to really do anything other than go long or try to pass from the back. And we just couldn't pass from the back to save our lives. We just kept going long, and we were trying to win 50-50 balls in midfield, and it was a mess. Aiden Morrison was getting bodied off the ball, and as was Buzio. So the Mexico's game plan was quite good because also we normally have been a side that has tried to press to try to win the ball back ourselves. So we press really high to do that, and they didn't really care. They weren't really interested in necessarily playing through us either. For the most part, they were going long more times than not as well. And what they were doing is they would go long, maybe Scally would get the ball, and then they would immediately have someone ready to press him. So they were playing, tight that way, and we couldn't really handle it. That basically is where their goal comes from. So Scally just keeps giving the ball away. Scally basically gets the ball on the wing, and Robinson kind of plays him a little bit into trouble. Scally is pinned, and Scally plays it back. Robinson then boots it in the middle of the field. It's not really the best clearance because it doesn't really go anywhere. It kind of goes, it doesn't even go across into the halfway line. Mexico win it back, and then they basically win a cheap foul, 28 yards from goal after Ayrton, falls onto someone. And then, free kick, and Raul Jimenez has an unbelievable hit. I mean, I can't necessarily go with Turner either. It's just a really good free kick. And honestly, it was pretty cool for him. It was just Mexico's night, to be honest. It was great to see Jimenez back. He's been in great form for Fulham. As we mentioned, he also scored again this past weekend, and he had because he's been in and out of the Mexican side for the last year or so as well, and he's up there in age now. I think they said he's 33, but it's great to see him back in the Mexican side, and what a wonderful hit, what a wonderful moment for him. And I mentioned how it was Mexico's night because they also had was it Guadalajara? They had one of the players that has played for them over the years that has actually had some pretty good moments for the U.S. It was his kind of sending off game where he started 12 minutes or so, and then he came off. So it was just kind of their night. It was not ours. Second half was maybe a little bit better. Haji Wright came on, Brendan Vasquez came on. Vasquez did way more than I thought. Josh Sargent offered us a little bit more presence up front. We were able to create, 5 or 6 chances, which is better in the second half, but it was a little too late, and we basically they ended up getting a second goal because I think Tim Ream went to ground and basically, after Jimenez was played a ball and basically it fell to someone to have a tap in and was able to find the corner. So uh, I do think if Pochettino maybe deserves a little criticism, he did pick basically the same 11 that played versus Panama, and I don't know if he was in trying to install some chemistry. There are two ways to look at this, but we looked leggy. Uh, and we frankly we needed a more of a presence than Sargent offered or Brandon Aronson. Malik Tillman is another player that I haven't mentioned yet, which is not necessarily great because he had a big moment to kind of stake a claim for a starting spot, especially when those games when Gio Reyna maybe isn't always available. Reyna always has these injury issues, and nope, he didn't necessarily do well either. So it was a big chance wasted by both Aronson and Tillman, but also Sargent. No threat at all to again Balogun or Pepe or even Gio Timwea, losing their spots or Dest, as well. Can mention Scally. Richards is going to enjoy what Robinson did because he was quite poor as well. You know, Boozy and Morris were quite pretty good or were serviceable versus Panama. Uh, but Panama were kind of sitting back, so they were sitting deep. They're waiting for us to kind of basically lose the ball ourselves. Versus Mexico, they didn't necessarily give us a whole lot of time, and they struggled. They struggled a lot. So Johnny Cardoza would be another, or Tyler Adams, or Weston McKinney. McKinney's another that I haven't even mentioned. They have to feel pretty safe with their kind of spots as well. And I didn't. One thing to kind of finish with is I like the idea of trying to get Musa going. I don't really get why he wasn't just given a role in a pivot. Maybe just they didn't feel like they had anyone to play on that right side. There could be some of that, but I don't think Musa's really ever going to play on the wing side, for AC Milan because Pochettino has talked about he wanted to get Musa involved so he gets more playing time for his club team. I don't necessarily see what the point of it was. He gets a goal versus Panama, so that was great. He was able to make a run into the box. Uh, I see him as either a pivot player or if we play a 4-3-3 as a number 8. And I think a very good number 8, a possession-minded, press-resistant number 8. So you talk about how we did not do well under pressure. Musa's very good at bodying the ball and keeping it. Maybe he doesn't always have the best pass on him, but I just think it was maybe a mistake not to play him a little bit more. Aiden Morris apparently has been playing well in the championship. He did not necessarily look comfortable versus Mexico. Another player that didn't necessarily show well is Tim Ream, and Tim Ream is 38 now. I don't think he should have played both games. I don't think he should have started either game. And his positioning, and him being hesitant, to be aggressive. He's always not reaction. He's always kind of waiting. He's not proactive. I guess we can say. That hurt a little bit for the Mexico goal. So. Again, the couple ways to talk about it. It's a nearly a full starting 11 that we were missing out. So I don't really look at it that much. To be honest, now there were again Alexia lost absolutely melted down. So I don't necessarily feel like that needs to happen, that we need to lose our head. But that's the next window is Nations League. We've drawn Jamaica, who nearly beat us in the last semifinals. I think that was the game when we needed basically a 95-minute corner kick goal just to get to extra time, and then Hanji Ray was able to get two. So I think we can maybe judge a little bit more Pochettino after he has another kind of window to get to mess with his team to kind of see what he wants. But that said, I can't be hypocritical. Had this kind of been what Berhalter had run with, kind of trying out players in these kind of positions. Yeah, I think he would have probably gotten some criticism, and there would have been a lot of doom, like, "Oh, we're not going to do anything." And now there's Pochettino in charge, and we kind of throw out that. Uh, Again, I think it's more kind of a look, more kind of an open look into, or kind of a broader look into our depth is not there, which is problematic. We only have 2 years now, or less than 2 years, and so that's kind of what's on the cards here. And you look at what happened in the Olympic team in the summertime. It doesn't feel like there are a ton of players that can come in and really help us out. There's Kevin Paredes, there's Kate Cal, and I don't feel like if nothing else, if Tim Way is not able to go, then I actually wanna see Cade Cowell come back into the starting 11. Now he's left the MLS and he's been, playing in Mexico. I don't think it's necessarily right that he wasn't involved in the Olympic team. He was on the under U21 sides, or he was on the World Cup sides, the youth World Cup sides. All the way from 17 level to 20. Uh, Surprised he didn't make the Olympic squad. If nothing else, he's got some pace to him, and that is what we need. You've got someone like a Brendan Aronson needs someone to have runs ahead of him. So Josh Sargent it was looking for the ball to kind of find his feet, and I usually think he can be someone that runs for channels, but it wasn't necessarily great. So that is where we end with that, and then we will get started with the EPL review. Week 8. I'm gonna try not to spend the whole show on Liverpool and Chelsea, but I probably will spend the majority of it, and then I'll probably talk about what happened with Arsenal, Man City. Maybe talk a little bit with the Man United game, and then we'll see where we are for time. I'm probably not going to spend as much detail as I normally do. I do want to talk a little bit what happened with the uh, with the Leicester and Southampton game, because that ended up being a bit of a shock on Saturday. A 5 goal thriller, really bad for Russell Martin. His job might be on the line if it wasn't already, that because he had a 2-0 lead. And then he was forced to kind of make a sub. And we'll get to what that is, but basically that game came down to two decisions. Marcel Martin having to lose Sugawara, and instead of trying, I think it's Charlie Taylor, who would have been like for like. He brings on Ryan Fraser, moves Kyle Walker Peters and onto the other side to kind of change the fullback side, and that coinciding with what Steve Cooper did, bringing on Fadua. That ended up basically winning Leicester the game, and credit to Steve Cooper, because I feel like normally he's one of the more pragmatic, scared out of his boots manager, and he made because he played Fadawawu at right back. That isn't that he's like a winger, it was a very attack minded sub, and he was rewarded with it because that he was involved for all 3 goals that Leicester ended up scoring. So anyways, we'll get started with Liverpool and Chelsea. Like I mentioned, and Liverpool do win 2-1. To get started, there was an interesting moment with Tosin and Jota. I thought it was going to be Arsenal 2.0 with what happened with Saliba. It wasn't there. The commentators were trying to justify it, saying, "Well, Levy Colwell is there." I think Jota's going to get to that ball, and I think Jota's going to be able to outrun Levy Colwell. That's just kind of my opinion, but yeah, only a yellow card. Tosin doesn't really need to do that, so it was a bit of a shock as well. Well, maybe he does. Maybe he feels like Jota's going to be able to get by him as well. And he ends up falling on Jota, and Jota ends up kind of hurting his rib cage. So Jota ends up going off, and Darwin Núñez has to come on. And weirdly enough, this helped Liverpool win the game. because Jota in that first couple of 20 minutes or so, was trying to look for the ball. He was trying to do this ball to feet stuff, trying to be an extra man in midfield, and he could not keep hold of it. He was losing it time and time again. And I've mentioned it before. Jota, I usually want Jota to play. Because when the chances come to him in the box, he's the best other than Salah, he's the best finisher, pure finisher, in the squad. But Liverpool were struggling just to get hold on the ball. That first 20 minutes, Chelsea were very good at just kind of keeping it, and it feels like the way that the game or the first half played out was almost it was what both managers basically wanted. To be honest, Liverpool were trying to press Chelsea into or trying to put Chelsea into a situation where they have the front four and so you only have 2, and Chelsea were trying to kind of overload that a little bit by playing, Marco Corella more in kind of in midfield than necessarily or Marlo Gusto more in midfield, than necessarily at fullback, and so they were able to kind of overload the midfield a little bit, and, Marco Corella or Malo Gusto was getting the ball, in space, and this is where maybe he screwed up because he was very, his the first thought in his head was to immediately get Jadon Sancho the ball. Uh, and what was happening too often or not, Liverpool were fine with this because Trent Alexander-Arnold is in position to defend Sancho 1v1. Sancho wasn't able to get by him a single time. You always had Kanate that was there for help. Virgil van Dijk was always in good positions. And on the other side, you had Robinson kind of doing the same thing. Liverpool were actually quite sound defensively. They weren't necessarily able to turn Chelsea over, but all this possession in that 21st 20 minutes or so, Chelsea never were able to register a shot. There was maybe a half PK shout on Sancho when Trent Alexander-Arnold, I think, stepped on his foot. Apparently, the VAR people looked at it. There was nothing, but there was also, they looked at the Tosin thing. So there you go. And then there was a half PK shout, or I think a full PK shout for Liverpool on Salah that was ignored as well. And I don't understand how you could just bowl someone off the ball, from behind, like the way that Colwell did. Colwell was just, embarrassed. So I think he went in with bad intentions as well. Salah isn't able to get that, but Liverpool are able to basically make amends just a couple minutes after that, where Salah uh, does kind of well, Salah gets the ball free again. He tries to go for a shot actually, and it's kind of deflected, and the deflection ends up finding Curtis Jones in the area of all places, and I believe it is. It is Tosin, or it was Levy Colwell. Basically, one kind of takes a swipe and gets a lot of Curtis Jones's leg. So it's called. Salah converts the PK, and then Nicholas Jackson in the second half, in the 48th minute. So all of a sudden, 1-1. You wonder, is this maybe going to be kind of those kind of games? And then Curtis Jones, like a couple minutes after that, made it 2-1, and then after that, Liverpool changed a little bit how they were setting up. I mentioned how they had the front four. They dropped that. Darwin Núñez was playing basically one man pressing by himself, and the idea for him was to just basically be a nuisance to any center back that had the ball, or be a nuisance when Robert Sanchez had the ball. And Liverpool were dropping Slubberschlei into that kind of to make basically a 3-man midfield, and that just and the way that they moved Salah onto Vega, they allowed Trent to do 1v1 with Neto. That kind of nullified a lot of what Chelsea were trying to do. So the second half was much better it was kind of a tactical game really from both sides. Chelsea, went into this wanting to have kind of control the game, wanting to have possession, but the possession didn't really matter because it never really felt like they were really that threatening outside of Jackson being able to get in behind for his goal. You look back and there were a couple of moments when Cole Palmer was able to be dangerous. There was a moment in the first half or late in the first half when he was able to I think he got the ball from Madueke. He was able to shift the ball to his left foot and had a pretty good shot. He just barely missed. And then he was also there were a couple of moments when Curtis Jones or someone was able to get back into position and to block when maybe Palmer or Madueke would have been in dangerous moments. I think Sloboshai had a pretty big block in the second half as well. So that's kind of setting up where the game kind of went. Just kind of leading off where to start. Liverpool were top of the table coming into this, but they were about to experience a pretty brutal run of a couple of games here now. And the last game after the international break was Nottingham Forest, and everyone knows what happened there. And so and coming into this, there was no Alexis. There was Alexis had to go off as Crystal Palace, and there was a lot of Liverpool fans that were upset because Alexis was used in the international break for Argentina in a game they won like 6-0. And then Luis Diaz was rested as well for the international travel. So the squad was shuffled up a little bit, and with Chelsea, there was a lot of hype coming into this game, and deservedly so. And it was really a chance to just Enzo Maresca to kind of show us what he's all about. And I feel like I, I'll try not to be as harsh as as I wanted to be afterwards, because I don't really like the way that a couple of these managers are starting to go, where they care more about having control of the game, having control of possession, than necessarily being threatening with it. And he's not the only one that kind of does this, but I just feel, and the fact that he bragged about having more possession at Anfield, it's like, kudos, man. But you had I think they had even like 60% of the ball at Anfield, and that is not an easy thing to do. But you look, and I think they netted like 12 shots overall with it, and I think Keller maybe had to make save maybe 2 saves the entire game. So it's like they weren't really able to do anything with it, and I feel like the way he was using his fullbacks uh, played a role in that, or the way that he was using his quote unquote midfielders. They never had, when the wingers got the ball in pretty good areas, it was always 1v1. And as long as the fullbacks could handle those 1v1s, Chelsea weren't really able to, maybe you could do a cross here and there, but they weren't really able to ever create any overloads on the wings. Everything was through the middle. And Liverpool, again, were very uh, uh, defensively set. I think the phrase is rest defense, and they were very good with their rest defense. So, another thing to kind of talk about as well is there is a bit of a rivalry that has been brewing between these two clubs over the years. Liverpool lost Fernando Torres to Chelsea. I feel like Liverpool maybe got one back for getting Mo Salah. Over the last few years, apparently they just nabbed a youngster from their academy too in Rio Nuamanga. Uh, last summer, that Moses Caicedo and Roman Lavia drama, happened, and it was funny how both, started in this game when they easily could have both been, wearing red had things been a little bit different. The other thing to talk about is the last 3 trophies under Klopp came basically at Chelsea's expense. 2 over Thomas Tuchel as well, and then last year everyone remembers the Klopp's kids with Virgil van Dijk winning the EFL final last season as well. So we get to the starting lineup. It's not a ton of changes. Alexander-Arnold, Konate, Virgil van Dijk, Robbo is what you expect, Gravenberch, and Curtis Jones. So instead of Alexis McAllister, Curtis Jones is the guy that ends up coming in, and we end up seeing how that ended up actually working out for Liverpool. And then Salah, Szoboszlai, Cody Gakpo, and then Jota instead of Darwin Núñez. As we mentioned, Jota ended up getting hurt. Darwin Núñez came on. And we ended up seeing how that worked out. That with Chelsea, what was something different? So Reece James returned, and they played him at center back, and it's very weird because James was quite good on the ball, but defensively he got. There were more times, there were multiple times when basically he was played in behind, or had someone that basically lost a runner in behind, and he also I think he ended up losing the ball to Jota, and got lucky on that kind of foul being given, because Jota basically would have been through on goal in the first like 5 minutes. So very interesting to see the way Chelsea was, or James was played. You think of Reece James, and you think of him being one of the better, kind of guys that makes bombing runs ahead. Now he's just coming off a hamstring injury, so maybe you don't really want to test that as well. I understand that, but I just think it was very interesting to see, because I remember Reece James in a game a year ago in the first season, or in the first game of the season last year, when James overlapping Sterling almost made Andy Robertson want to retire. Chelsea were unbelievable that day. That I think they netted like a 6 xG against Liverpool that day. I think it ended up winning or leading to a 1-1 kind of game. But just that last year, the way that Chelsea were just it was so different than what we saw here. So we see James Tolson and Colwell, and then Casado, Lavia, and basically Gusto was basically a third midfielder for them. So kind of 3 in midfield, and then you have 3 ahead with Madueke, Palmer, and Sancho. Both of them were playing very out wide. Basically, they were kind of the wing backs, or attackers, as you say. And then Jackson ahead. And again, I do feel like it was a bit of a mess. Now, it allowed them to have control of the game, uh, but if you don't have a goal, if you don't have the lead, it doesn't really matter. And once they went behind, they didn't change, and that's kind of another thing you can maybe go a little bit at Enzo Maresca. So we kind of get started. I mentioned how again Liverpool were very comfortable in their rest defense to start. Chelsea did start off with a lot of the ball, but again, it never really felt like they were able to do anything, make anything count. Uh, Another thing too is Chelsea would kind of ping balls out to Sancho. Trent would be there to slow Sancho down, and then Gravenberch and Curtis Jones would have time to recover and maybe stop balls being played into the box from Sancho. So I mentioned the kind of ref decisions. Don't really have to talk about that. The Jota fall on the Tosin fall on Jota. So it brings Darwin Núñez on, and this is how the game changed because again it mentioned how Jota was having a problem holding on to the ball. Darwin Núñez came on, and he was the complete opposite. He was very dependable, having the ball play to his feet, back to goal. He was holding people off. The first thing he did was he got on the ball, did a turn with Salah, then you basically did a spin, and he immediately made a run into the channel. Chelsea were playing a very deep high line, and that is just cake basically for Darwin Núñez to exploit. And just it wasn't necessarily we weren't seeing those kind of runs from Jota, and that basically it made Chelsea kind of think again. Should we kind of play this high up? They were playing a high line because they were also trying to press Liverpool very, very high up, and that's another thing too. Liverpool structure kind of changed a little bit with Nunez, coming on because uh, before it, Liverpool were struggling a little bit to play out of the back, and that's the reason why Chelsea had a lot of control on the game. The options weren't really there. Kelleher was forced to go long, and too often than not, Liverpool weren't really able to win those battles. After Darwin Núñez came on, it was different. Salah was able to get picked out a couple of times and hold his man off, and then Núñez would always be kind of out there as well. And it just kind of it changed a little bit how Chelsea, if you want to, Liverpool were having so many people, deep playing deep, 6 or 7 guys, and if you're going to man mark, that forces Chelsea to mark 6 or 7 guys all the way up there, and then you're kind of exposed a little bit at the back to pacey runs from Nunez or Salah or even Cody Gakpo. Cody Gakpo is like 6'4" or 6'3". That's not really the matchup you really want if you're Reece James, who's just coming off a hamstring injury. So it was interesting to see how Liverpool again didn't necessarily care about having possession necessarily. They didn't really lose it in bad areas. So as Chelsea were doing quite well to make Liverpool go long, but Liverpool were doing very well to go long. And so here's where I mean by that. So in right before Liverpool get their PK, there were a couple of events that happened. So Chelsea have the first really scary moment. Madueke is able to beat Robinson 1v1, and he has a cross to Palmer. It's pretty good to pick Palmer out, but Curtis Jones is right there, and he has an unbelievable block because otherwise maybe Palmer even scores here. And then Liverpool will cover. They go long, Salah controls it, takes Levi Colwell on 1v1, burns him, and then Colwell swipes basically from behind. No foul is given, and then we do get to the PK. Liverpool start to find it really easy to get Darwin Núñez and Gakpo, and then we get to the PK, which comes again from I think it's Kanate here that goes long, and Liverpool were able to manufacture something here. They were to go get the ball up ahead. I think Curtis Jones actually ends up carrying it a little bit. Then he plays it to Salah. Salah cuts inside. He tries to go for a shot, but Curtis Jones continues his run into the box, and the ball kind of finds him, and then basically they bring him down, and then Salah converts the PK, and then things start to get kind of going in Liverpool's favor. Liverpool start to find it really easy to get Darwin Núñez or Gakpo free down the channels to start quick counters on Chelsea. Salah with some unbelievable long balls in this stretch. Salah was also the focal point in a lot of Liverpool's build-up plays. So I mentioned how they were going long. Chelsea were forcing Liverpool to go long. Normally, you feel like that's a win for the team that's doing that, but Salah was doing very well to control the ball that was played to him. He was able to handle Gusto 1v1. And Liverpool were able to create a couple of moments that way, and then they nearly get a second PK. It was first called, and then it was ended up reversed. Probably the right call was made. Sanchez comes out and basically was able to get to the ball before contacting Jones. But it's another moment where Liverpool were able to go long. I think it's Darwin Núñez that has a helpful helpful kind of hold up play. He or Salah is free again, and he's able to pick out Darwin Núñez with the kind of the outside of the ball, outside of the foot pass. It's a very good pass. Darwin Núñez is able to collect it, and then he looks up and he has Curtis Jones, continuing a run, making a run ahead of him, and plays him the ball into the box. Jones, does a nice job to turn, but he doesn't able to. He's not able to get the shot off in time. Sanchez actually does a pretty good job to come out and stop this. Another thing to talk about is there was a goal that was also scored by Cody Gakpo that was ruled offsides. It came after a corner kick where Liverpool were able to recycle, and it was another kind of moment where. Again, Curtis Jones it was kind of being on the ball. He being asked to kind of make decisions. He's Curtis Jones is very good with the ball at his feet. Just his problem is he doesn't release it early enough sometimes, and that kind of showed up. That really showed up here. He had a moment to actually play Salah in. He waited a little bit. Salah just ventured off just a tad offsides, and then Salah was able to credit the Salah as well. 'Cause Salah was finally able to use his right foot and able to get enough power to do that square pass, and then Cody Gakpo was right there, back shoulder. Reece James loses him, and it was offside, so it didn't really count. So we get to halftime, and again, the commentators were just raving how dominant Chelsea were, and it just felt weird because it felt like Liverpool were the team that was kind of asking all the questions. To be honest, they were the ones that looked way more threatening when they had the ball than necessarily Chelsea did. Uh, and the Jota incident was big. Because I mentioned how Nunez came on. One thing I didn't say is a lot of the ways how Liverpool were able to get a lot of transitions is there would be some times where it would feel like Chelsea actually had an extra man kind of outside the box. It would have been Moses Caicedo, and more times, it happened 2 times where Darwin Nunez actually did well to track Caicedo's late run upfield. Uh, and he's able to, body him off. He's able to win the ball back that way. And there was one moment when he actually played an unbelievable ball to Cody Gakpo, when that maybe could have led to something more because Sloboshai was played by Cody Gakpo, and Sloboshai didn't necessarily have the best hit, just got to hit it right at Sanchez. But the defensive shift that Nunez was doing, there was so much running and work rate from him that kind of canceled out Chelsea's extra man in midfield advantage as well. So it was counter football a little bit from Liverpool, not always what you would expect, but it was working. And frankly, the way that Chelsea were playing, it was fine to work that way. Uh, they mentioned how Chelsea had the most touches in the final third for a team that had played at Anfield in a couple of years, but again, really 0 shots on target, and everyone was always in possession to make a defensive play, whether it was Curtis Jones or whether it was Robinson or Trent Alexander-Arnold. And for a lot of people that have been going at Alexander-Arnold for his defense, he put Jadon Sancho in his pocket, and so Enzo Maresca didn't necessarily like what he was seeing. So Jadon Sancho off, Pedro Neto comes on. I actually thought this was a clever move because there's more directness in Neto's game. He maybe would give Trent a little bit more problems, and we kind of see that a little bit, but it wasn't still nearly enough. But Chelsea do get back in the game, make it 1-1 with Nicholas Jackson. So one thing, Cole Palmer was in the first half. Too often he was waiting for the ball to kind of find him, and it really wasn't. So what he ends up doing is he starts kind of being a little bit more of a decoy because Curtis Jones was following him left and right, and Curtis Jones is part of the pivot. Liverpool playing with 2 in midfield, double pivot. And what they were able to do is they were able to manufacture Gravenberch kind of being a little bit by himself, or basically. So what happens is Cole Palmer goes out wide. That almost creates an overload because Chelsea, if they pass to him, Cole Palmer gets the ball, and now Robinson has to deal with Madueke, making a back shoulder run on him, and Cole Palmer basically, running at him. So Curtis Jones has to kind of mark him or kind of just shift a little bit further wide than maybe he wants to just kind of mark that. Chelsea basically end up, switching play to the other side of the field, and Malo Gusto gets the ball, and he actually sees Moises Caicedo wide open in the middle of the field. Gravenberch is kind of drawn a little bit to Roman Lavia as well, and Moises Caicedo is just kind of right there. This probably could have been Cody Gakpo's man, but he just kind of loses him. It's in the heart of the moment. It's a really good play by Malo Gusto to pick Moises Caicedo. And Caicedo gets the ball, and he does a very good job. He does a little like Enzo Fernandez impression. He has a great through ball to find Nicholas Jackson making a run where Virgil van Dijk is kind of wrong-footed. He's not really able to, not really prepared for that, and Kanate and Robinson aren't able to recover. So, and it's a great finish by Nicholas Jackson. And so there you go, 1-1. 2 minutes into the second half, Chelsea had all this possession, and that was when you start to get a little bit worried if you're a Liverpool fan, but there wasn't enough time to really worry because Liverpool basically score, 2 minutes after that. Oh, and basically they find the ball again to Salah. Salah was had basically Salah was able to do whatever he wanted really, whether it was Levitt Colwell on him, whether it was Marlo Gusto on him, and Salah basically uses the run that Subtleshy offers on the overlap. It gets the ball onto his left foot, and he has an unbelievable kind of cross or just kind of pass into the box to pick out Curtis Jones, continuing his run, and then Jones was able to have kind of a bit of I don't want to say it was a heavy touch, but it wasn't necessarily the best touch. Robert Sanchez though isn't able to come out quickly enough, and Curtis Jones is able to recover and able to slot it in with his other foot. Reece James loses them though. Reece James loses the run, but that Curtis Jones makes. Reece James is also trying to play the offside, but Curtis Jones would have been onside regardless because of the where Marlo Gusto or Levi Colwell was. So. And it was like the fourth time that Jones was able to make a late run into the Chelsea box unmarked. And I'll touch on it later. That's kind of the thing that Chelsea didn't have this game. They didn't have these, players that were making runs into the box, late. Moses Caicedo was maybe doing it a couple of times, but he's not really a goal threat. And even then, Liverpool were able to kind of mark it. Chelsea were allowing this to happen more times than not. So Liverpool get the second goal, and Chelsea make a triple sub. So here comes James off. That makes sense because he's only returned after basically missing out a year. So having a minutes restriction makes sense. Tosin off wasn't doing necessarily that great. So I guess that made sense too. One thing to say that I haven't said is Chelsea went into this game a little limbered. They lost two players to yellow cards because of what happened late in the Nottingham Forest game. So no Mark Cucurella, which actually I think ended up factoring in because Marlo Gusto, while he was able to do a job in midfield, it's not the same because he doesn't have a left foot, and that ended up showing up as well. That said, Marlo Gusto did do a very good job to have that ball to Caicedo that helped Chelsea score their first goal. But they're missing him. They were also missing Wesley Fofana, so maybe that's the reason why they tried James where they did. So they take Dosen off, one of the other center backs, and bring Badiashile on. Badiashile's big, big and strong, big beast in the air, but he's kind of a player that you use to maybe mark Darwin Núñez in the box. He's not really someone that you use when you're down a man. So you bring on another center back, and not really someone that has the best with his feet, and not really the quickest either. So it was kind of an interesting move, to say the least. And then Roman Lavia came off for Enzo Fernandez. Another one that came on was Renato Vega. So here you actually have someone that's a little bit more kind of left-footed, more natural. It comes on and for Marlo Gusto, basically they move Marlo Gusto to right back, and basically Vega plays at the inverted left back, kind of in midfield as well. And there were a couple of times they were able to kind of overload. Here, Ronaldo Vega is a little bit more kind of I guess comfortable playing with the ball at his feet than Gusto, because with his left foot. And one thing he was doing is he was getting the ball and he was actually driving and he was carrying with it. There were a couple of times when they did get Liverpool a little bit out of position, when maybe Salah was out trying to press a little high up, and then Trent was kind of forced into a 2v1. He didn't really know what to do with Neto. So there were a couple of moments when that ended up kind of causing some problems, but Salah also did a very good job to track back in those moments as well. Kanate was able to shift over. So again, Liverpool's defensive shape was just really good for whatever Chelsea were throwing at him. Enzo Fernandez coming on as well. He's very good with the ball at his feet, but he's not really someone that's going to make runs ahead into the box crash, which is what Chelsea really needed. So it was kind of for Liverpool, you just kind of needed to focus on Cole Palmer, make sure he doesn't really get the ball kind of near the box, and just whenever the wide players, whether it was Neto. When Madueke came off, they brought in Nkuku. They moved Neto to the other side to play Nkuku on the right side, and it was relatively comfortable. To be honest, there was a moment late in the game when Nkuku made a little bit run off Joe Gomez that he kind of missed. There was a really nice cross by Neto to the back post, and it's possible Nkuku could have gotten onto the end of that, or if the ball had just been a little bit better, maybe he does score there. But the changes I was personally fearing was maybe Chelsea either using wingbacks or just kind of overlapping fullbacks to get Robinson and Trent into 2v1s. or the other one would have been taking Palmer off, playing in Cuckoo maybe behind Jackson, or having either Neto or even bringing Mudryk on. Having some pace off the ball. That would have been frightening to me because everyone was just it was too ball to feet. It was too slow in progression, and again, Liverpool were just able to defend whatever came to them. You already mentioned how Liverpool's shape kind of changed as well after they went up 2-1. So instead of Chelsea being able to kind of get a lot of those overloads in midfield after they changed how Liverpool were playing out of possession with Darwin Núñez pressed a little bit by himself. Szoboszlai is able to cover Caicedo better. Gravenberch basically had Enzo in his pocket. Curtis Jones was just doing man v one stuff with Cole Palmer. Salah had Vega, Ronaldo Vega, and then Trent had Neto. And as long as none of those players actually lost their guy, it was relatively easy for them to just stick with them. If maybe you had to switch it off, normally it was pretty easy for them to do that as well. So that little tweak just kind of stopped Chelsea being able to get the ball to Caicedo in the middle of the field with ease. It stopped them being able to find Jackson making his runs. It just stopped everything. Chelsea were kind of forced to hopeful crosses from out wide, and good luck doing that with Kanate and Virgil van Dijk. So that's kind of just where we are. There are a couple of chances for Liverpool to maybe get a third. There was a really nice ball by Salah again to play Gakpo in. Salah's playmaking is unbelievable, but he got inside and missed. And then Diaz came on and he had some similar moments as well, just not able to find the scoring touch either. And then other things to talk about there. Liverpool did have to have some late blocks. There was a big one by Szoboszlai on Cole Palmer, and then the Nkunku miss, and then I think Renato Vega did have there was a late kind of free kick that was called that was making Arne Slot meltdown in stoppage time, where Cole Palmer had a pretty nice ball into the box that Renato Vega probably should have done better on it, to be honest. He was able to get the head on it, but he had it over the bar. So this game easily could have ended 2-2, and I don't think I would have been able to really been that upset. Three big chances for Liverpool, three big chances for Chelsea. I think Liverpool had like 9 or 10 shots. Chelsea maybe had outshot them with 12. Uh, no McAllister, I do think maybe affected Liverpool's ability to kind of play through lines, but that said, no McAllister allowed Curtis Jones to be able to kind of make some forward runs into the box that maybe McAllister wouldn't have made. And lo and behold, that's basically is what wins it. That's why having box crashing people that make runs forward into the box from deep is so crucial. Yeah, Chelsea feels like they have everyone covered, everything's good, and then you have somebody that just makes a run in behind that just you end up missing, and all of a sudden you're outnumbered, and that ended up happening more times than not. Liverpool probably could have gotten more than they did by using Jones that way. So it was clever. The other thing too is the shapes that Liverpool are playing now in games. You start maybe with a formation, but everything just changes. There'll be times when they try to play with three at the back, or maybe they try to move Trent Alexander-Arnold as one of the three the three that they're trying to pass with, or maybe they try Trent Alexander-Arnold in Willie High as a fullback on the wing, or they maybe try Alexander-Arnold through the middle in the pivot. Or they move Gravenberch out wide. Just the shapes that they move throughout the game nothing is really stagnant. And so one thing they're able to do is maybe it goes from 4-2-4, or sometimes it goes to a 4-3-3, where they have Gravenberch kind of drop in a little bit by himself. They're playing, they're making a risk here, but what that allows is someone like a Curtis Jones that starts outplaying deep to make runs ahead, and that is basically where he basically ends up being kind of an attacking number 8 in this kind of profile, and that ends up basically winning them the game. So again, shots again a little bit for the Anfield for an Anfield game, but it felt like Slot came into this game wanting to nullify Chelsea's attack, and that they were able to successfully do that. Uh, Liverpool being just so good defensively on the wings is not something I'm used to. Now they are about to play Arsenal, and Arsenal, I think they said Saka is going to be available, and you have Martinelli that's kind of had the better of Trent in a couple of these games. So I don't necessarily know if they'll do this kind of the same kind of setup. But one thing you're seeing is you didn't necessarily see Trent just doing a whole lot of bombing runs themselves. He was able to get forward a couple of times, but it felt like the idea really was to be defensively secure on the wing side as much as possible because it almost felt like they were fine having Chelsea having the ball as long as they weren't down a goal, because it just felt like eventually the only ways to get through them would have been to go out wide, and Chelsea were never able to create overloads out wide. So it was a interesting tactic, to say the least, and to kind of end a little bit here, we have Salah being unbelievable good. Again, it just anything positive just really came from him. He was the outball when Liverpool were going long. He was the one that was making just really great decisions in the final third. He was making Hollywood passes to play people in with the outside of his foot. Long passes as well. Uh, had maybe an assist that was chalked off for the offsides, but the idea was there. And he floats the ball in for the Jones goal. So his playmaking this year has been unreal. Maybe not necessarily the goals, but he scores as well with the PK. But just the playmaking has been elite. To be honest, probably has been that way for a couple of seasons now. But just the top of the quality on the ball that he was playing was every single time it seemed like he has unlocked that ability now. Darwin Núñez gets his flowers as well. You mentioned the defensive work rate, but also the link-up play, just the clever little touches. He runs into channels. He's always kind of been known for that, but his hold-up play has gotten so much better over the last 2 seasons. It's people were comparing him to Firmino on online. Liverpool fans were doing that when people were calling him Donkey Nunez just a year ago. So credit to him, to figuring to working on that, and his link-up play, like, he played a ball to Cody Gakpo that just did not make sense. He also, uh, there was a moment when it maybe for the offsides goal where he had a brilliant, like, chest pass, to play Curtis Jones, and that kind of, led before Jones, tried to find Salah. So Darwin Núñez was unbelievable, and I think I've said it before, going forward, as long as he's fit, I kind of want him to be the number 9, starting ahead. As much as I love Jota and what he offers for finishing, now we haven't seen Darwin Núñez get into the 1v1s where, he's been forced to show off if he's been able to, be a better finisher, but at least a hardworking number 9 that just makes all these runs, you can get goal scoring from elsewhere because that kind of production itself will lead to more numbers, more attacks going forward, and so can't say enough of praise from him. And I have been someone that has kind of attacked him a little bit in the past. He deserves his flowers this game. I think he scored yesterday as well. And then Kanate and Virgil, best. I don't want to say the best center back partnership in the league, but the way that they've only conceded 2 goals or 3 goals for the season to start, it just feels like Kanate. You can play a high line, but it's also the aggressiveness. A couple of times when it felt like maybe Chelsea actually had Liverpool in some bother because Jackson was actually doing a pretty good job to kind of not just to be someone to look for the shoulder. He was running to the ball in midfield as well. Sometimes that would kind of create them to have a numbers advantage in their favor, and Kanate was just following it and being aggressive and just having defenders that can be aggressive and to defend in big spaces is everything, but also they're both incredibly good with the ball at their feet. Kanate has really improved that part of his game. Curtis and Gravenberch, the recovery defending was massive. Sometimes when you've got a winger on the ball like a Sancho, and maybe he's not going to be a 1v1, maybe he's not going to do that, but what he's trying to do is he's trying to wait for the ball. He's trying to hold up for other people to join in. And the guys continuing their runs, they were never able to get open because they were always tracked. So unbelievable by Curtis and Gravenberch in that respect. Curtis is just very good with the ball at his feet as well. Again, just if he can unlock a little more of that kind of release ability, if he could just learn to possess like that early vision, he goes from being just a bit part player to possibly being a must start for England in a couple of years. I think he's that good because he's got everything. He's got the build you want. He's got unbelievable. You talk about press resistance. He's got that in his locker as good as really anyone. He's like 21 or 22 as well. He's crazy young. He's never really been able to get a whole lot of game time as well. So I feel like he's kind of he's been hampered by not in his development by not actually playing a full season in the championship or a different kind of league. But if he needs to kind of figure out how to keep his head up and how to have that kind of pass, to play people in, because that is the only thing that is holding him back, because everything else is unreal. Uh, and it feels like he's finally starting to find his flowers. It's been kind of confusing where to play him. In the beginning, they were trying to play him, further upfield as an attacker. He doesn't, because he has a good shot on him, but he doesn't really have that 1v1 ability either. And apparently, he did play in the under 21 side for England in the pivot, and it was him and Angel Gomez, and it looked quite good there, to be honest. And again, credit to him. Gravenberch continues to have a good game after good game. Uh, that's someone that came in. You didn't know what Liverpool were going to do without a six. I still feel like they could bring a six in. You could play Gravenberch or even Alexis McAllister further up. And I mentioned how another reason to pray Curtis Jones is Liverpool went into this game without probably their second best midfielder in Alexis McAllister. And other than maybe again the passing numbers weren't really there, but you would have were you kind of if you're a Liverpool fan, you probably would have worried a little bit about that coming into this. And Curtis Jones was able to do enough where you were like, Alexis who? I probably shouldn't say that, because Alexis McAllister is still the second best, or maybe even the first best midfielder in the squad. So maybe a little squad depth, at least as far as who can play at CM. I still feel like they need a number six. Brook can't play every single game. It doesn't feel like there's a lot of trust into nearly enough. So we'll see if they maybe try to address that in the January window or not. And the other things to kind of talk about is people are kind of going at Sloboshai a little bit. One thing I want to say is it's not like he's a number 8, 10 like people were expecting. People thought he was going to be Kevin De Bruyne like. I kind of did. When I say people, uh, he honestly is like a Hungarian version of Jordan Henderson, but someone that's just much better on the ball. So if you think of him that way, it's much better. Like everyone talks about the kind of runs he makes. The His work rate is unbelievable. Now, maybe he doesn't have the best kind of final pass, but again, it's his overlap run that ends up taking a player off solid that's able to get the cross off. There are a couple of times when Trent Alexander-Arnold was out of position, Szoboszlai was running back and covering as well. And the fact that he was when Szoboszlai in the second half was kind of forced to kind of mark Moses Caicedo out of the game. Just you can't say enough about him. You would like to maybe for the end product to be a little bit higher than it is, especially because sometimes Liverpool do have a problem finishing chances. But maybe we'll see that eventually. But I think people maybe need to respect him a little bit more. And so that there we go. I mean, up next is Arsenal. They're not going to have Saliba, as we talk about. No Odegaard as well. Possible they will have Saka. We'll have to see about that. But the pressure is going to be on Liverpool to, I think, win that game at the Emirates. Slight concern with Jota. We'll have to see. We'll have to follow up his update. I think Nunez is probably the best striker to play anyways, but it would have been nice to have Jota maybe to come on off the bench if you need a goal. It feels like Slot is sticking with Gakpo to start the last couple of games. We'll see if it was Diaz lost a spot just because of the international break or something else has happened there. We'll have to see how that works. Diaz maybe has a little revenge on his mind because Thomas Partey kind of took basically a season or two from Luis Diaz from a couple of years ago. I am a little concerned with Martinelli versus Alexander-Arnold, but because he has gotten the better of him in the past. But one thing that Liverpool did versus AC Milan that I want to talk about is they had Trent playing further up. Whoever like the fullback was, I think it was Teo Hernandez, and they had Kanate to basically handle Rafael Leao 1v1 kind of by himself. Wondering if you maybe do that because Arsenal play Kai Havertz, and it is just so different. It's not Havertz can make runs in the channels, but it's not really someone you're gonna really worry about kind of making runs in behind. So we'll have to see how that factors in or not. That could possibly be a terrible thing to say that ages poorly. I think Havertz actually kind of owned in that 3-1 game, but I'm trying to remember how that went. Gonna be interesting to see as well if Timber can recover for them. Maybe Ben White actually plays center back alongside Gabriel without Saliba. So maybe Timber comes in, gives him a little bit better. I think that actually helps him out at right back. The other thing though is it looks like Calafiori maybe got hurt in their last Champions League game. So who do you play at left back? If it's Zinchenko, Salah has schooled Zinchenko left and right over the years. So you talk about how maybe Alexander Arnold versus Martinelli isn't the best matchup. That probably isn't the best matchup either in Arsenal's favor. So those are the kind of things to talk about. And then we get to Chelsea. Mentioned how these suspensions probably did hurt them a little bit. Uh, and I just think the not giving the wingers any kind of support, I think hurts them. The it was a strange way to play Cole Palmer a little bit. They maybe fixed it a little bit in the second half, having him to kind of be a little bit more of kind of a decoy to his runs kind of open things up. Again, the lack of runs in the midfield was a problem. They weren't able to have any disguised runs in the box. So Nicholas Jackson, that can be positive. The way he was running into channels and having that finish. Caicedo was very good in the pivot, good defensively as well. Very good when he being pressed as well. Liverpool trying to press him and turn it over. Uh, and just Lavia started the game, and I didn't feel like he was necessarily playing poor either. Reece James' quality on the ball is still there, but again, just first game back, it's taken a while for it. I mean, it take a while for him to get going back to his normal use. I do think it was just interesting to not see either of them use either fullback really use or even a wingback. You only had again Madueke or Sancho or even Neto came on and just it was a bit goofy a little bit. Even as a center back, you could have had maybe Moses Caicedo stays back and you have Reece James do an overlap on just you didn't have to do it every game or every minute of the game, but just having one little overlap run with Madueke when Robertson would have been isolated, that probably could have led to something, and they didn't do it. So it is what it is. Robert Sanchez is also really pouring the ball for them. Their goalkeeper. One of the ways that Liverpool were able to win the ball back time and time was just having Darwin Núñez just kind of apply some simple pressure, whether it was or Curtis Jones being able to apply some simple pressure, running at him, where just you put a ball away, and that's how you are able to get going as well. So a little lesson for this young Chelsea side and coach. Again, he bragged about possession in the post game conference or post game interview. Congrats, but again, Slot got the points, so. I think he'll probably be okay with that. And then we'll look at where we are for time. We get to Man City and Wolves. Let's see. Uh, Going to pause it for a second. All right, and we'll move on to Man City and Wolves. I promise it will not be nearly as long. We get the first goal from a big Norwegian scoring, and it is not Holland. So we get one from Larson, um, and then we get Jaska Gvardiol or Jaska De Bruyne. As I put in here, and then we get to John Stones at the very end, the 95th minute. Uh, Leading off story coming into this game is it was a very strange game for Man City versus Fulham, and whether or not it is the miss of Rodri, and I kind of think it is, but or maybe something else. It does feel like City are vulnerable on the counter or and transition. You don't have. You don't have Kyle Walker the way that Man City used or the way that Pep used to have. Because even versus Fulham, Kyle Walker came on and Adama was still able to get behind him. Now maybe that is just Adama being able to do that, but at least in here, Rico Lewis was not able to handle Larson being able to run around him. And it wasn't the only time that Wolves was able to actually get a little bit of a break where it required Ederson to be on his game. He was able to make a pretty big stop on Nelson Semedo to just keep it being 2-1 or 2-0. Wolves came into this with basically they were so bad with Wolves, so bad with versus Brentford, uh, and it wasn't nearly just the amount of goals that they conceded. It was just the ease that Brentford were able to create those chances. Just so much poor defending on set pieces, and just would O'Neill have a response? And he changed systems. He went to a back three, played with three center backs, to help with Holland. It wasn't just Craig Dawson and Toddy Gomez. They brought in Santiago Bueno, and frankly, it worked. And this is maybe you wonder could Wolves maybe find something to copy? Could they maybe do to exploit a little bit what Fulham exploited in their last game? And the answer was yes. So We do get a bit of a response. And so, to get started, we have Rico, Lewis, Stones, Diaz, and Gvardiol. So we get John Stones back into the lineup. And then it's kind of just Kovacic by himself. And then Bernardo Silva and Gundogan kind of, kind of double tens a little bit ahead. And then you had Savio, Doku, and Holland. And you look at that and you think this is probably the only maybe critique I would have is, you're going against maybe they didn't know they were gonna be going against a back five, but they probably would have known Wolves is gonna be sitting deep against them. And when you're sitting deep, there's not really a whole lot of space to really create, so you need 1v1 creators out wide, so you have that in Savio and Doku, and both were able to create, quite well. They were able to get around, both Ait and Semedo, especially Doku. Um the surprise was Bernardo Silva and Gundogan tried together. Now Bernardo Silva is in the both in the final third are very good at creating finding those kind of gaps. But I was a little bit surprised because you don't have Kevin De Bruyne to not see Phil Foden actually get a start because and I wouldn't want him to actually be played on the wing. I would want him to kind of be a little bit in that double 10 area because in the final third, sometimes in a packed box, sometimes you just need someone to have a hit on him, and that is what Phil Foden does. And funny enough, they get the goal that they needed to tie the game from Gvardiol of all players, and it comes from Doku being able to draw that double team to drop because he was able to get behind again, Semedo or whoever was defending him time and time again, and he was getting pretty good crosses into the box, but they were always low. It was interesting they never went high with someone like Holland being in the box, but uh, finally Wolves were able to try to double team him, and so when you double team, that leaves someone open, and a cutback ball finds Guardiola, and he was able to have a wonderful curler from outside the box with his left foot or right foot, and what a hit this was. He's starting to have quite an interesting goal catalog for him. But it was a very interesting game because Man City were able to create a couple of looks, but they weren't really peppering necessarily the goal. Jose Sa did have to make a couple saves though. Did have to make a pretty good save on Bernardo Silva. There was one by Savio late in the second half as well. So you get to halftime. It is 1-1, and it stayed 1-1 for a very long time. Now, Phil Foden did finally come on in the second half, but really the change that kind of changed the game a little bit was a bit of an old foe for Wolves. It was Mateus Nunes, coming on, and Mateus Nunes was able to run back, and he makes an unbelievable challenge on I believe it's Forbes when it looked like maybe Wolves actually had a break, and he's able to cut in from behind, win the ball back, not fouling, and then he helps lead to basically a counter, basically a break from Man City's way, and he's able to create a corner kick. And City, this is in extra time. This is after the 90 has happened, and City basically win 2 or 3 corner kicks in a row after this. City had 19 corner kicks in total, and basically after the 18th, the ball looks like it's maybe going over Holland's head, but Hugo Bueno basically heads it out of bounds, and so they get the 19th. And on the 19th, there's Stones there to win it. Some talks about Bernardo Silva being offsides, maybe interfering a little bit. I don't really think so. I think he's ducking. I think it's probably a good call. I'm someone that would probably want uh, Man City to have that ruled out, but I couldn't really justify that, to be honest. But it was not really a clean cut game. There were now Wolves were sitting so deep. One of the problems with doing that is when you do able to stop make a defensive stop, you can't really play your way out of danger because you have such a long way to run. Eventually, the legs do tire, and I think that basically happened. Another thing too is Mateus Cunha was hooked early in the second half. Then Larson actually had to go off. You know, being as big of a body he is, I don't necessarily know if it was for injury or for a tactical reason. They brought in Guedes, and it wasn't like for like. And the Wolves maybe had a moment with Forbes, but it was very few and far in between. I think Wolves had like 5 shots the entire game, maybe it was even 3. It was very, very small. But they were able to get a lot of their shots on target. I think 3 for 2. Uh, but this was all about Wolves not being embarrassed because you saw what they did just a week ago or just a couple of weeks ago versus Brentford, and you would have imagined this could have been the game that got Gary O'Neill fired, and instead, actually, I think it's given them a reason to not only believe and stick with Gary O'Neill. I think it's given them a reason to think they'll be fine staying up in the league if they kind of stick with this kind of principle where because they've got a very good midfield with the ball at their feet, and they've got runners, willing runners ahead, and you've got Nori and Semedo maybe aren't the best defensively, but are very good going forward and very good at making runs ahead as well. There are goals in this team, and if you can defend this way. Uh, there's enough for them to stay up when you see how Ipswich are handling the league so far, how Southampton and Leicester are as well. It just at least with those. So we'll see if that would also require maybe them not suffering any other injuries, but we never know how that will work. I think. This was the first time when you saw this can maybe do something. The change in system definitely did help them. Um, and the other kind of take to talk about is City had that Madrid-like inevitability factor this season, where very similar to the Arsenal game, Jack Grealish comes on, and the first thing he looks to do is he tries to actually get to the byline and swing some crosses in with his weaker left foot. I feel like he wasn't always doing this, but the last couple of games that he's been able to come in, he's actually been doing that. Uh, and they weren't really looking for Holland at all, and Grealish actually was. So that was a bit of a surprise. And then John Stones, just like for Arsenal, is there to save the day and to win City the points. And Mateus Nunes coming in being the big play factor at the end versus former club. Jose Sa did have to make 5 saves. I mean, Man City was 22 shots and 7. That's respectable, but it's a low XG. It's only 1.6. Touches in the penalty area though is mad. It is 4 for Wolves and it is 85 for Man City. So it's probably what you would expect. Uh, and again, just no Kevin De Bruyne, no Rodri. They were able to find a way. They were able to get a goal that Kevin De Bruyne probably would have scored. Again, it's all about surviving until you finally get De Bruyne back. But also, no De Bruyne, you figured this is probably when Foden should start shining a little bit, and we haven't seen that yet. Apparently, he did score in the Champions League game yesterday, so I'll have to see how that goal was, how his highlights were. Man City apparently scored 5. Apparently, Holland had an unbelievable kind of over the head, acrobatic goal again, not using his head, just kind of getting his foot higher than everyone else. I'll have to see how that, at least reading about it, I'll have to see what that looked like. Uh, but without Kevin De Bruyne, Haaland has started to blank again. At least before yesterday. And again, I don't really think it's necessarily his fault. I think City are struggling to find him the ball. There was really only one time when I think it was when it might have even been when Mateus Nunes was able to win the ball back, where Phil Foden got the ball and had an unbelievable long ball hit to find Haaland the ball in space, and he had a great collection with it. He's able to get past Craig Dawson, was able to force a decent saw save. But they just weren't able to really find him. And again, who cares if he's being marked? He's such a big body. Just have some hopeful crosses into the box. Who cares if the defense is able to head it away when you don't really have any way to necessarily counter off you because the legs, especially in the second half when it's late. Uh, all you're going to do is just recycle it, and City probably going to have pretty good chances to win that 50-50 aerial duel coming back down. So a little bit surprised that City haven't been a little bit more kind of risk taking in that respect, but Pep just seems like so terrified of being counted on, and maybe he's justified because of the way that Wolves did get their goal. Uh, and speaking with Wolves, yes, it's a kick at the teeth. Maybe Semedo 1v1 could have made it 2-0. Uh, you know, Mateus Nunes coming back to kind of be the guy that stabs you in the back. But again, I do think there are a lot more positives than negatives because of the change in formation, the way it worked. We know it worked last year. I mentioned it last episode that Wolves were playing mostly a back three last season as well. So and also Jose Sal back in goal. He's not really been the starting keeper for them this season. I don't really understand why. Maybe he got blamed a little bit when they got blasted by Chelsea, but this was again, this is something that I think they can build on. So I've been burned on that before. Kind of thinking the team would be safe. But we'll see. Again, not getting any more injuries. I already have a couple at the back that has hurted them. We'll have to see what happens with Larson. Larson did have to go off. We'll have to follow that news because it doesn't feel like they really have a striker themselves, like per se. I do like the little chemistry between Larson and Cunha so far. It feels like they can do a two man game. The midfield is the options are pretty good with Andre Yao Gomez and Mario Lamena. Feels like they pretty good balance there. But Andre actually got hooked at halftime. I don't really understand why that happened. They brought in Tommy Doyle, and I don't really feel like he necessarily did anything. But I think this club is, at least the way the roster is, it's better than the three promoted sides, but only just. And maybe they might have to make a move in January. You lose Neto, and I think they brought in like this Pedro Gomez, player that started versus Arsenal, but we haven't seen him since. Maybe he's hurt as well, so maybe you can finally get him in. Forbes, when he's been able to play, has actually been able to look pretty good. He looked quite good coming in versus Man City as well. So maybe that can be the idea as well. And then we get to Arsenal and Bournemouth, do to put on the upset, the surprise of the weekend, winning 2-0. Now, yes, it is helped by the red card. Uh, we'll get to that. Like William Saliba, I don't think should have done that, but I also think there are a couple of players that messed up. I don't think Trustward should have done the ball that he did. I think maybe Raya could possibly have when you're playing such a high line, maybe Raya should be a little bit more alert to be a sweeper keeper. But even then, maybe the ball's not going to find him. Just Saliba shouldn't have uh, taken Evan Nielsen down, because even if Evan Nielsen's able to get on the ball 1v1, we've actually seen him struggle to finish those chances. We even saw that in this game, because again, Evan Nielsen was played in behind. It was also an Arsenal boo boo. I think it's Kilwar that came on, and he also wasn't able to finish that 1v1. Raya was able to stop him at least, and then Raya basically ended up falling him down after Evan Nielsen tried to go around him. But it doesn't feel like that confidence is necessarily there. Evan Nielsen, has missed a PK, and maybe that has shaken him a little bit. He does a lot of good things out of possession, but he's just not been the guy that's been able to find the net so far. And they paid a lot of money for him. He's kind of he's the Solanke replacement for them. But this game was kind of there was nothing in it to start. And now Arsenal went into this without Saka. Saka got hurt over the international break, and it looks like he might be good for Liverpool. We'll have to follow. Still no Odegaard, and without Odegaard, without Saka and Odegaard, there's just no creation at all in this team. No Timber as well, but they did get Ben White back. So maybe that could be something. They basically played Ben White at center back after the Saliba red card. Uh, and before again the international break, Arsenal were playing it close a little bit with the two promoted sides, with Leicester and with Southampton. Despite dominating, despite having 30 shots at both of those games, it was close with both of those. And again, both of those games were also without Odegaard as well, and you just feel like they should have gone into the season where in the offseason they didn't bring in a striker for some reason, and they didn't bring in a kind of like a secondary, I guess, playmaker in case they lost Odegaard. In fact, what they did was they ended up selling the quote unquote Odegaard replacement in Emil Smith Rowe, and I don't know if it was for financial fair play reasons or not. That to me was a bit kind of uh, in hindsight, maybe not necessarily the best move. Or maybe Smith Rowe kind of forced the change. He wanted to kind of play a little bit more. He didn't feel like he had his spot. But they also sold Fabio Vieira, whether or not they believed he was good enough or not. But they just don't have anyone at all. There's the next guy up is like a 17-year-old in Ethan Nayeri. Now maybe he's good enough. Apparently, Arsenal fans really wanted to see him more. Apparently, he's looked good when he's played for them in Champions League minutes or in EFL Cup minutes. But that Arsenal team is struggling for creativity. You're not going to get from Havertz. Jesus wasn't, was able to start versus Southampton, or didn't start in this game. And you've got Trossard that can maybe do that job, but they played Trossard on the wing instead of maybe Martinelli. And I think that was a bit of that's probably where Arteta screwed up in making the lineup here, not starting Martinelli and having Trossard kind of being your number 10 with Havertz. I feel like they probably would have won this game kind of comfortably had they been able to do that. But it was a strange game because instead Arteta went almost a very defensive lineup in a way. You've got Ben White, who's a center back that's playing at fullback. Then you have Saliba, Gabriel, and then you have Calafiori, and then you have Thomas Partey, Declan Rice, and Mikel Merino gets his first start. And Mikel Merino, they're those all three kind of defensive-minded, kind of CM type midfielders, not really playmakers. And they basically play Merino higher up almost like the Odegaard kind of replacement. There were a couple moments where Marino was able to do a couple nice flicks, nice ways to get ahead. I think the best chance that Arsenal had in this first half came to Marino, and he had a good shot. He just kind of missed it wide, but that was a bit surprising. But also, you have Sterling and Trossard and Havertz can make runs into channels, but he's not necessarily a creator, not really a 1v1 kind of guy. Trossard's quite good in the box, but you need to get him there. Sterling's the only one that really pace and playmaking ability. And the thing that's funny to me is once you lost Saliba, the first thing Arteta did was take Sterling off to bring on Kiwior to bring on another center back. And I just think it was too early to do that. And I think that really is the move that basically cost them the game. But that said, in the second half, there was really nothing going on. For either side. Bournemouth were able to actually get a couple overloads with Ben White. They were using Watatara and Kirkez, just kind of doing bullying 2v1 basically versus him. And then they kind of moved Watatara to bring on Semenyo. Maybe it was the opposite, and just Bournemouth were able to create a couple looks, but it was nothing really sustainable, nothing really sustained. There was not really a moment when David Raya was kind of scared or forced to make a lot of saves. The only moments that Raya was under pressure was kind of under his own doing. Actually, Bournemouth were very good at pressing high, even before the red card. And they were able to actually make Raya make some mistakes that way. Raya actually had to make a pretty big save after making a massive mistake early on into the game. But it was it was another kind of game as far as which team when either team having the ball. Both teams were very good out of possession, but not there wasn't really a whole lot of creativity in it. And then Arsenal did bring on Martinelli instead of Trossard, and lo and behold, it was Bournemouth's turn to make a mistake. It was Kepa. Kepa basically plays the ball right to Mikel Merino. Merino does a very good job to actually play in Martinelli in the box, and there's a lot of goal for Martinelli to look for, and he instead just kind of hits it right at Kepa. Kepa is able to make a save. It is a big save, and that basically keeps Bournemouth in the game because if Arsenal get that first goal, who knows how this actually goes. And then 90 seconds later, they get a corner kick, and they score on the corner kick. And lo and behold, it's a little set piece that Arsenal are undone by. It's a nice little training ground exercise where the ball is kind of played to, I believe it's Patrick Kluivert, and Patrick Kluivert basically does kind of a flick, a first-time flick, and they're able to get to Ryan Christie, who's wide open, top of the box. And again, it makes sense. You're going to have someone that's open because Arsenal is down a man, and they made that extra man count. And it's a great hit by Ryan Christie. And there were a couple of other moments for Bournemouth. There was a moment where, again, Kirkez and I think it's Watatara or Semenyo, or it's Watatara that basically was able to get free down the wing, and then that cross into the box had Semenyo just wide open, and he just blasted it over. Not really able to get Evan Nielsen really that many looks. And then towards, I guess, the 80th minute or so, there's kind of a nothing ball that's kind of cleared to Kiwior, and Kiwior tries to play it back to David Raya and mishits it. And then Evan Nielsen's able to run onto that, tries to go past David Raya, and David Raya kind of just clips him a little bit. And then second PK is called, and they score on the second, or they score on that PK to do get that all-important second goal to close out the game. So it was an interesting game. Not just interesting for other reasons. The way that Bournemouth press really high without the ball. There's been someone that's mentioned how they win the ball back higher up. It's like Spurs, and then it's like Bournemouth, for like two of the best pressing sides as far as winning the ball back. Success in the league, and that's not really something you would probably expect to see. I think I've already said it before. The Iriola's kind of Bournemouth side is very similar to Maurizio Pochettino's Southampton side before he went to Spurs. In my opinion, I'm going to be interested to see if eventually one of the bigger clubs, maybe not necessarily in England, but I don't know if Bayern Munich kind of think if company's not going to work out, if someone eventually does kind of look at Andre Iriola. We'll have to see. We'll have to see, or not. Man United lose Ten Hag. That wouldn't be the worst kind of player or coach to kind of look at either. But I don't necessarily know if they would go that way. Now that said, you don't really have the passing patterns. You don't really have the buildup that a lot of top sides really want. But I don't necessarily know if that is Ariola not being able to coach that, or just him kind of being limited a little bit with what he has. But with what he has, he's got Bournemouth in a very comfortable spot. You don't really feel like they're going to be a team that's going to be facing relegation. And we'll see if they're able to get Evan Nilsson going a little bit more able to get that, draw the PK. Maybe that'll get his confidence going a little bit. They could have scored a couple of goals with Semenyo, just not necessarily on it here. Clavert and Ryan Christie actually started the game on the bench. Usually they've been starters, so Sinisterra as well. So they've got some options there. Apparently Tyler Adams was on the bench, so that's another thing that's positive. They started with Lewis Cook and Alex Scott, and then it wasn't it wasn't necessarily working for Alex Scott, so they brought in Ryan Christie, and Christie actually ends up scoring the first goal for Bournemouth. It ends up being the game winner. One thing to talk about with Lewis Cook, is there was one moment when I think it's in the first half. Actually, Arsenal are already down a man. Bournemouth have a corner kick, and I think it's Kai Havertz. Someone does very well to actually win the ball back, start the counter, and maybe it's even Mikel Merino. But there's just Lewis Trossard is making a sprint down the wing, and if this is Martinelli, I actually think this is probably going to be a goal, or at least it's going to lead to a 1v1 chance where the keeper has to make a save. But instead, Lewis Cook's able to slow down and cut off Trossard in his tracks. And you don't really think of Cook or being that pacey, but it's surprising that Trossard didn't try to take him on. And because he didn't, that actually maybe saved a goal there. So credit to Lewis Cook or Cook as well. So that's kind of where we are for this. Arsenal are going to be, dreading or just at least online, they were really upset about the Saliba red card. It's hard to. I think you just go at a little bit to his decision making. To be honest, Trossard shouldn't have done what he did either. So the red card is the story, but also down a man. Arsenal have been down a man a couple of times this season now against Man City. They did. You can't go with them a little bit at all. They played admirably down a man versus Manchester City, but versus Brighton, I thought it was a little bit interesting how Arteta took off Martin Odegaard early in the game to bring on Martinelli instead of Kai Havertz. Kai Havertz actually had a 1v1 to beat Brighton, even when they were down a man. He wasn't able to do it. I just feel like that could have been the time when you could have kept Odegaard on, and you could have maybe done Saka and Martinelli as kind of a front two. Just because Brighton are playing up, you've got Lewis Dunk, you just have to run in behind, but didn't do it there. And I just think he was too risk averse here to take off Sterling immediately when he did. Yeah, it was. I just think it was the wrong move, but it hurts them, and there we go. I mean, two big chances for Arsenal, to be fair to them, with the Martinelli one. They had 6 shots, only 1 on target. They did have majority of the ball. To be fair to them as well. But again, the other thing too is just the way that he started out. Arteta picked for his starting lineup. Again, it was risk averse. So it just feels like that is what Arteta is, and so Arsenal were getting scares, and they weren't able to adjust, and so there you go. I mean, 3 games that they've dropped points have been the games that they've lost men. So as long as they don't lose get a red card versus Liverpool, maybe they'll be okay. I don't really know. Uh, but again, you're down a man or not, you still there would have still been opportunities. Adam Smith came on in the second half for Bournemouth. That's someone that you can go at with pace, and so little of a surprise. We'll see what they do versus Liverpool. It's weird because it feels like almost backs against the wall in some respects. Usually that's kind of scary. To be honest, they are going to be playing at the Emirates. They've been very good there as well. It feels like it's going to be an us against the world kind of mentality. Now they're not going to have Saliba. But they might have Saka back, and they've got enough the defenders at least to maybe handle not having Saliba at least for a game. We'll have to see. We'll have to see if they just play very very dogged, and maybe they get something on a set piece. We'll have to see that as well. No Allison for Liverpool. We'll have to see if Keller is very good in the air at being dominant in the box or not. That probably is the biggest thing I'm a little bit worried about. If Liverpool have to defend a lot of corner kicks. Can they handle Kelleher being aggressive, being dominant in the air? We'll have to see about that. And just with Bournemouth, one thing I want to praise them is they were a side, or at least this team understood where the extra man could help them, or I guess hurt Arsenal the most, and it was overloading the wings. So often teams are just so against playing fullbacks higher up because they're so worried about being counted on and where the space is out on the channels. They did not care. They were using Kirkez as kind of the extra man to just really, really hurt them, and it was great. They were getting really dangerous cross after cross. It wasn't necessarily working out, but more often than not, it was actually leading to some cheap corner kicks. And that absolutely is what they end up, getting their goal on. So I liked it. It was Kirkez with Watatar. It was Kirkez with Sinistera. It was Kirkez with Antoine Semenyo. He was just kind of everywhere. So good to see. And then we get to Tottenham and West Ham. This will probably be the second to last. I'll do this one in Man United and then kind of maybe pause a little bit for the end, see how we're doing for time. Uh, Tottenham do go on to win 4-1. It was really big for them to kind of bounce back after what happened with Brighton, but it didn't help that they ended up conceding first with Mo Kudus, who had an eventful day himself. And then Kulishevsky makes it 1-1. Unbelievable hit. Good for him. Madison's able to get on the ball. Plays the ball forward for Kulishevsky, then he cuts towards goal and then has his left foot to pick out the corner. Great hit from him. And then the interesting thing was, Madison created like five chances for Spurs in that first half, but he was hooked. He was subbed off, and on comes Ibrahim Sarr to come on for Spurs, and that sub actually ends up winning them the game. It's kind of, you figured it's a defensive minded sub, but what it really was it was a sub that would give them more energy in midfield that the Madison maybe would offer. It would give them more dual winning. And it would give them, if Sarr has the pace to maybe to cover more ground, to maybe if Udogi goes out wide to make a run, maybe Sarr can do a little bit more recovery. It just felt it was a balanced sub than necessarily anything else, and it actually leads to a couple more goals. So Sarr is able to play in it's a nice little pass to Son, and then Son sees Udogi making a run to the byline. Son plays him the ball, and then Udogi, square ball, back into the box, finds Bissouma top of the box, and he's able to apply the finish. And it's the second time I've seen him do that. I think he did that versus Everton as well. And then Tadibo with the own goal to makes it 3-1, and then Son was able to cap off his return with a goal, with a finish, with a 1v1 finish after being played a nice ball from Son. At that point, the game had kind of been done and dusted for West Ham. The West Ham felt like almost stopped playing a little bit. Paqueta stopped making runs back. It felt like Souček was kind of getting outworked a little bit in midfield. You just had Rodriguez just by himself, and it was really easy for Spurs to get turnovers, to get transition moments, and to just break towards the back line that just was in retreat mode and did not handle. Tadiba did not really handle himself well versus Son. Then again, not many people can. You just see Son. Son's just kind of one of those very rare attacking players that can go both directions. You don't really know what foot he wants to get it on because he's two-footed in that respect, and he's able to do a couple step overs, gets Tadibo just completely off balance, and then he's able to shift it onto his left and finds it past Ariola. Uh, Big bounce back for Spurs, and they really did need it because coming into this, they had that 2-goal lead versus Brighton, let it slip due to defensive mistakes. It wasn't necessarily like they were out of position. It was just a couple of moments when just errors really helped them out. But I just thought, even in that game, I just thought the midfield was a little imbalanced. They didn't have, it's Madison can help you out in some cases, but in that game, it was Madison and Betancourt. At least here, Basuma was back, but it just feels like Sarr gives them a little bit something else. Now, maybe in games when you're up against a team that's really pressing you, maybe Madison helps you out a little bit more. But in this case, Spurs had majority of the ball, and it was all about just pressing and finding a way to turn over West Ham and maybe defend a little bit, against Bowen or against Kudus or against Antonio. So the game required something different, and credit to Ange for making that sub. That's a big call to make because if he gets it wrong, he's getting hounded because English media want James Madison to really work. For him being English, but he's kind of like I don't wanna say a watered down version of like a Phil Foden or De Bruyne, but he's a creative player that's not really, he doesn't really play like a normal English midfielder. I guess I'll put it that way. But it's kind of a weird kind of situation where uh, it's almost like a one or the other between Madison and Kulishevsky to be their number 10, to be their playmaker, really, because the way that they use Pedro Porro and Udogi to kind of be like their tens, you need something else. And uh, that's where I think, again, Sark offers a little bit more defensive security. Now, again, in other games when maybe Spurs need to have someone that's a little bit better with the ball at his feet, maybe Madison can work from deeper. Uh, but Yeah, that was just that was something to highlight, and then also solid return. And you don't really want to go with Timo Werner, but because he did an admirable job at least when he was played in Son's injury stead. But I don't think Werner finishes that 1v1 to make it 4-1. It's just kind of one of those things where you almost have to wait, make him prove it, then because he's had too many chances to prove otherwise. So a little bit more pessimistic on that side. Son is kind of the opposite. Son's kind of proven over the years that he can be reliable for scoring those 1v1s. Uh, Brendan Johnson didn't score. Had a couple moments to net, but again, Brendan Johnson just makes a lot of runs that leads to a couple of these moments as well. And then, weirdly enough, Solanke hasn't been able to get going for them as far as goal scoring goes, but he's very good at running into channels, or he's very good at actually dropping and doing some link up play. Actually, rarely enough, there's a little Harry Kane in the way that he's dropping into these deeper positions to help link up because he's bringing center backs to run with him, and then you've got these balls over the head for Brendan Johnson or Son to kind of chase, and they're exploiting. They're using him in different ways than I was expecting. I do think eventually they will be able to get him to help him net as well, but that's been interesting as well. And then West Ham came into this probably feeling pretty good about themselves. They just had that giant win over Ipswich, but Tottenham are not Ipswich, as we've just found out. The thing that's weird though is we're not seeing Edson Alvarez get starts anymore. He had that one mistake for Chelsea, and he's been kind of out of favor. So we saw Wan-Bissaka, Tadibo, Kilman, Emerson, and then Rodriguez kind of by himself, and then Thomas Suchek and Paqueta. That's where it probably ended up hurting them a little bit because there you've got a couple guys who want the ball, want to be in the box, want to make runs forward, not necessarily known for their defensive awareness. So you saw Rodriguez just by himself more times than not. That basically is where they lost the game. Then Bowen and Kudus weren't able to offer a whole lot of defensive protection either. And then you have Antonio. Again, West Ham were able to create a goal. Get the lead, but it was just the way that the Spurs kind of blitzkrieged them a little bit in the second half. And then the last thing to touch on is Kudus did get lose his head a little bit towards the end. He did get himself sent off. So no Kudus for the next couple of games for West Ham as well, just as he's probably just getting going. So uh, there we go. At least for that. So again, given the way that things went just a couple of weeks ago, big for Ange, big for Tottenham. Still feels like they can make a push, to be honest, as long as they can keep Mickey Van de Ven and Romero healthy. Especially if Sar gives them a little bit more protection than they've had, especially with Basuma as well. So we'll see if Spurs can. You get Son back. Maybe you can get Solanke going as well. But we'll see if Spurs can actually start to carry this into some momentum. 22 shots and 7 on target for them. Majority possession. West Ham were poor. 11 shots, 4 on target. Possession 43%, and under 300 passes completed. Yeah, again, the Sar sub changed the game, and we'll see what that means for Madison going forward. I don't necessarily think it's the end of him, the end of the experiment, trying him in deeper, because you actually see it for the first goal. He gets on the ball and he actually plays the ball, the forward ball to Kulusevski. Maybe Sar wouldn't have done that kind of pass, but there are other ways where it can hurt you. But the and the way Kulusevski being freed up, I think helps him out a little bit more as well when he doesn't really have Madison in his corners. So uh, we'll see if they can carry this on going forward. And with West Ham, once you finally get some momentum, and then this game kind of happens, and all of a sudden you feel like Lopetegui maybe is on the hot seat again. Unfortunately for him, I just feel like Paqueta and Suchek is not enough protection for games like this, but that would become midfield battles basically because West Ham aren't really known for a side that plays from the back and they're able to pass and build from the back. So you do a lot of long switches. The ball. Spurs were doing a pretty good job to press the goalkeeper, and that's kind of the theme in a lot of these games too. Keep teams that don't have keepers that can keep the ball under pressure. Just a couple long balls really is what leads to actually some of these goals for Spurs in that second half. Just the keeper goes long, and then you don't have West Ham don't have the bodies near where the ball lands. Spurs do, and Spurs are able to quickly win the possession back and immediately go into a counter. So and then we get to Man United and Brentford. where Man United do win 2-1, and so Ten Hag's able to get some momentum after the Aston Villa results. It wasn't really the prettiest game, but it just able to stop the losing, stop the bleeding, able to respond after the international break to win 2-1. We get a little bit of an interesting kind of second look or a different look to Man United. So we'll get into a little bit of that as well. I mentioned a couple of weeks ago where I thought any team that can run can probably hurt this side, and I included Brentford in that. And I don't think I was necessarily wrong. I just think Brentford went into this a little bit maybe overinflated by their last game with Wolves, where they scored 5 goals with ease. Overinflated a little bit because Thomas Frank normally when he goes away to these quote unquote big six sides, he uses back threes and he usually doubles up on the wings. He usually uses three center backs and uses uh, again he usually tries to protect out wide. Here he went with a back four again, and it basically Man United were able to kind of not only a back four, still played with four center backs and played Sepp Vandenberg at fullback. And mentioned it versus Wolves. Vandenberg was very good on the ball, but here he was asked to do a little bit more defending, and Garnacho was able to take him on 1v1. Rashford was able to take him on 1v1. It was just he was isolated. He never really had help either, and Brimo wasn't really helping back. Maybe the idea was to have Brimo always be available for a long ball over the top in cases when you won the ball. I don't really know. Damsgaard wasn't really able to help out either, and Vandenberg just was not having fun because even before Man United were able to get back into the game, Garnacho probably could have had a couple of goals in the first half as well. Rashford was able to get him behind, and he was able to create a shot where Flecken had to make a save. I think Flecken had to make 9 saves overall, but it was weird because all that said, the first 30 minutes I thought Brentford actually did dominate the game. I thought Norgard, Damsgaard, and Janelt were actually controlling the midfield for the most part. I thought they were doing a pretty good job of Man United were trying to press and whatnot, and Brentford were able to play around it with ease, able to get some pretty good looks. They actually had the opening scare at 2 minutes into the game. They almost scored again or to start the game, where I think it's Lewis Potter gets free and has a great cross into the box, and Kevin Schade probably should score this. If nothing else, he should. He misses it. He whiffs it. He gets in behind. He makes a run that splits Johnny Evans and Mateus de Ligt. You look at that Man United back line, you would have thought, yeah, Kevin Schade with his pace or in Brimo, yeah, this isn't really the best, especially if Man United going to press. You're going to have some opportunities here if Man United get caught playing a high line. And here, it's not even a high line, but it's just the pace is able to get in behind, and he just whiffs it. He's not able to connect on it. But that said, they were able to create a couple more chances as well. Just the Man United were kind of forced to be a little bit more on the counter in that first half. They were able to make a couple of chances with Garnacho and again Rashford, but it was kind of far and few between. And then the other thing that happened is Kevin Schade basically kneed Mateus de Ligt in the head, and basically this happened like 3 times in that half where he had to go off. And right after Mateus de Ligt was able to stop a cross or kind of shot, Brentford get a late corner kick, and Mateus' head or de Ligt's head is just completely bloody. He has to go off for a third time, and Brentford score as he's off getting some treatment. Man United fans were extremely upset online. Ten Hag was incensed. De Ligt was incensed, but blood was already or just gushing down his head. It makes sense he had to go off. It was surprising they didn't just wrap his head. Maybe they didn't want to do that because maybe when you're running, maybe you don't want the blood to kind of swell up. I don't really know. We have seen head wraps used before, so it was a cut, and they weren't able to really get it to stop. They kept trying to do like gauze, or they almost like they were taping like gauze to his head to stop it. And it was goofy because he was using his head to actually stop some crosses, and that's the reason why it was kept bleeding. But he has to go, and he probably would have been in the area where Pennick was, and Pennick was able to make it count, make it punish, and then so Man United went into halftime losing, and they came back in the second half playing entirely different. It felt like there was a tactical change that Ten Hag did, in my opinion, that did kind of make things a little bit more uncomfortable for Brentford. They ended up using Diego Dallo, who got started at right back. They ended up using him more either in midfield or they basically used him as an extra man. Whether or not it was in midfield for build-up or they were actually having him to be really high up on the wing side. And it just felt like Brentford or Man United saw that the left winger for Brentford was Lewis Potter, and they just figured Mateus de Ligt can probably handle him 1v1, and basically he did. And so you pushed Diego Dallo a little bit higher up, and the Brentford or Man United basically ended up scoring a couple goals this way, or they score the first goal because of this. So uh, they're able to use him higher up, and that allows Rashford to actually have a little bit more kind of space to operate as well. And even before the goal comes, there was a moment where it looked like Rasmus was actually in on goal, and there was a brilliant tackle or kind of block by Ethan Pinnock going to ground. Otherwise, they probably could have scored there. And then Rashford's able to, after the ball was recycled, he's able to see that Vandenberg has just kind of lost sight of where Garnacho is. Garnacho makes a run behind him. It's onside. It's a great ball by Rashford, and Garnacho is able to get that one hit to go into the net. And then Rasmus Højlund makes it 2-1. Um, and it was fitting. It really was. It was probably the best game that I think I've seen him play for Man United, at least in some time. Because not just the goal, and he's deserving of the goal. It's a great little find, or great little find by Bruno Fernandes with a little flick to play him in. But he still has a lot to do because Flecken is coming out and he does the dink. He doesn't like lose his head. He doesn't take this quickly. He doesn't rush it. He has composure there. So. But the reason why I say it was probably one of his better games is he was doing what Brentford couldn't do with Kevin Schade. He was trying to run into midfield and trying to try to do these quick like 1-2 layouts. He was trying to be someone to be someone you could give the ball to hold on to the ball, to lay it off. And his hold up play, his link up play was very, very good. I hadn't seen this from him in a while. Now, maybe he has a feeling that he needs to do this because of the way that they brought in Joshua Zirkzee. That's kind of what Xerxes been doing. But Højlund was able to show he can do that job too. But Højlund, I feel like, is more of a threat in near goal than necessarily Xerxes is. I feel like you could possibly play them both together if Ten Hag wanted to do that. But here was a pretty good move because what you're doing by doing that is Brentford have to make a decision. Do you just allow an extra man to be there, or do you have a center back maybe follow him? And here it's Ethan Pinnock. Maybe he doesn't really want to do that. And if you do that, then you've got Rashford or you've got Garnacho on the wing side, really high up. You're not going to like those odds, taking on center backs, 1v1. So, pretty good tactical tweak, and a lot of it was helped by the way that they were using Dallo as well. So Dallo and Rasmus Højlund were helping them with their build-up. Not nearly as much focus with Bruno Fernandes. Interestingly enough, though, when the moment came when Christian Eriksen was able to feed a ball into Bruno. Bruno had a brilliant little flick that ended up playing Rasmus in behind. That's what led to the second goal. But it wasn't all everything worth praising because after the last 10 minutes or so, after Riza came on, Brentford had some moments. Brentford had moments when they actually turned Man United over, and there was space open for a counter where Dallo was out of position. You still have De Ligt that didn't actually go off, and whether or not it was Kevin Schade making a run or Riza or even Mbremo, the run was on. He was in behind, and just it happened like 3 times in that to 10 minutes. Brentford were mishitting the pass or not seeing it, and a better team probably does punish that. So I still think there's still some issues, but that said, right now it's all about just getting points. It's not really you're not going to care necessarily about the results. It's as good as Rashford has looked playmaking wise, and he was doing it from the right side, so that allows Garnacho to play a little bit more on the left. So we'll see if we see a little bit more of that as well, and we'll see what Man United, again, I've mentioned it before. We'll see what they look like when they get Lenny Yoro back in. Also, we mentioned how before a lot of their games, a lot of their goals, a lot of their weaknesses have been from Diego Dallo playing at left back and teams being able to go at that. Here, we saw Lisandro Martinez played at left back, and they almost shifted to kind of a back three, and that allowed Diego Dallo to be that extra man a little higher up. So we saw Diego Dallo play over Mazurai. I don't know and Mazurai, I think, did come on in the second half, so I don't think it was a fitness reason, or I don't think it was an injury reason. I think it was done tactically with that in mind because Diego Dallo probably was the best player last season playing at right back. And to start the season, they ended up shifting him over because they kind of had to. So interesting to see Ten Hag just tweak it up a little bit, just a tad. They also get Rasmus back. They haven't had Rasmus for a lot to start the season, so maybe Man United can get their season going. We'll have to see. They have a big game today versus Fenerbahce versus Jose Mourinho. So this could all end up backfiring again, and all of a sudden it'll be Ten Hag out again. We'll have to follow that. But if nothing else, they were defensively good versus Aston Villa, despite playing Johnny Evans and Harry Maguire. You lose Harry Maguire, and you got to play Johnny Evans and Matthias de Ligt. And again, if I'm Brentford, I'm thinking that would have probably favored me, but they weren't able to make it count. So credit where it is due, and that is where we end with that game. 23 shots. Flecken had to make 9 saves as well, to be fair to them. But Brentford did have 50% of the ball. Like I mentioned, it wasn't Brentford. Came into Old Trafford and outplayed them in many respects. Now, Man United had the better XG. Brentford only had 8 shots out of that possession. Uh, but that is kind of I think the main reason for that is it wasn't just Matthias de Ligt and Johnny Evans playing. The midfield was Christian Eriksen, who was very good with the ball at his feet, and Casemiro, which we've already seen in some of those games as well. Casemiro can be got at, though Casemiro did have a couple really nice balls to play over the top for Rashford and Garnacho. But again, when you can get them to have to work out of possession, that's probably where they are vulnerable. No Kobe Mano because of him being injured in the international window as well. So they were a little stretched. It was surprising to see Casemiro played over Ugarte, but maybe Ugarte is not really ready for it. But it worked out, so you can't really go at them. So and you can credit Ten Hag for changing it up a little bit. They played Rashford a little bit differently. I thought Rashford actually looked pretty comfortable playing on the right. We don't always necessarily see that. And again, Rasmus Højlund hold a play and his finishing. Maybe it's going to be a different Rasmus Højlund. We'll have to see about that as well. And then Delict being able to stay on, I wasn't really expecting that. I was thinking, why would not sub him off? Maybe he's having a concussion, but who knows? Maybe Lindelof, coming in instead, it wouldn't have been the same. I don't really know. Delict did just completely shut out because they were asking Lewis Potter to handle him 1v1, and Lewis Potter wasn't able to really do it. Brentford got into a situation where Man United were much better at building out in the back in the second half, and able to actually, instead of being this kind of directness, they were actually doing a very good job to get the ball forwards, but then also keep it. And basically, they pinned Brentford in that second half. And the further back Brentford actually got in, the balls over the top, the way for Brentford to counter wasn't really there. They were just they had so many numbers back defensively. It kind of allowed Man United to control a little bit more of that second half. The second half was much different than the first half, I must say. So, uh, kind of negatives. Already mentioned Vandenberg not being able to, not being good enough defensively. Now, again, he's young. You can't really necessarily go at him. I don't really know how much he's played at fullback, so it's a different position. He didn't really have help either. He didn't have any kind of support. So, Brentford are kind of forced to do this because they're so scant at fullback. They haven't been able to pull people to bring people in. The missing is it Aaron Hickey? They're missing. I think it's Hickey. They're missing Rico Henry on the other side. So usually you have Anya. I think it's Christoph Ayer who plays on that side instead. So a little bit of a surprise to see it tried out. It did work versus Wolves, but Man United are not Wolves. So and then Kevin Schade again, his inability to keep the ball, them getting Weiser back, I think will help them. So we'll see how that works too. And then so see how we're doing. Probably going to run through these a little bit quicker than I have so far. Uh, Fulham and Aston Villa end 3-1. It was a 1-0 game after Fulham just went long with Raul to Raul Jimenez, and I think it's Paul Torres who just allows the ball to bounce, and Jimenez just takes it quickly. It basically surprises Emi Martinez with a nice little hit, and then it looked like there was a chance for them to actually let's see, is that when it happened? No. Villa were able to equalize with Morgan Rogers. Jacob Ramsey was back in the side, and he's able to find Morgan Rogers in a little pocket, and then Rogers kind of collects it, turns it, has a shot. Also, it helps because right in front of Morgan Rogers is Ollie Watkins, and Ollie Watkins makes a little run, which drags Calvin Bassey and Anderson a little bit backwards as well, so that creates a little space and opening for the shot, and the shot basically deflects off someone to wrong foot Leno in, so we get 1-1. This is all in the first 10 minutes. And then still in the first, 15 minutes, Jimenez gets a free header for a corner kick and just misses. And then Watkins was also played through, and Tielemans forced a 1v1 that forced the Leno save. So a lot of action in the first opening 15 minutes. And then we get to a bit of a weird situation where there is a cheap PK given on a kind of a shaky handball. I think it's Mateus Pereira. No, maybe it's Raul Jimenez. Someone just heading the ball and it kind of hits Matty Cash's hand. It's in the air, but it's basically a foot away. The proximity of where this happens, I was surprised this was actually awarded, but it was. It was a chance for Fulham to actually go ahead, and Mateus Pereira misses, and it was a pretty big moment in the game. I have in my notes the ball doesn't lie because it was a pretty poor PK, but I didn't feel it was deserved. And then right before the second half or first half, Morgan Rogers did have a near miss. Tillmans, once again, was orchestrating things in the middle with some beautiful through passes, finds Ramsey making a run into the channel. Having Jacob Ramsey back because of the selfless running that he was making was opening things up as well. And then he has a cutback ball to find Morgan Rogers. Just everyone's focused on Ollie Watkins. The kind of trailing run by Rogers is open, but he just overhits it. And then we get to the second half, more kind of action for Jacob Ramsey. So he has a shot that forces an Amy Martinez. So we get to a Villa corner kick, and Ollie Watkins scores on the corner kick with a great header. And then we kind of get to the play of the game. So Villa have the lead 2-1. Matty Cash wins the ball by jumping in front of a pass Memphis Smith-Rowe. He draws it loose, plays it to Morgan Rogers, who then sees Watkins making a back shoulder run off Anderson, really up high upfield. I mean, this is not kind of the pass you would expect. And Morgan Rogers does kind of an arrow, like a De Bruyne, kind of through ball that ends up splitting. It's got the perfect weight on it, and Anderson is beaten. Ollie Watkins has basically made the run behind him on sides. Anderson is Rogers basically, or Ollie Watkins is basically 1v1 on goal if he's able to collect this. And Anderson freaks and basically brings him down from behind, and he's sent off. But this is pure Ollie Watkins. This is the kind of run that just helps an offense out so much because it's only him. He's the only one that's even in the vicinity ahead of Morgan Rogers when he gets the ball. And it's just like the selfless running that creates this. And Anderson probably shouldn't have done what he does because they're already losing. And then you go down a man, and it's killer. It's killer for momentum, not just this game, but now you're going to miss Anderson for the next 3 games because the other reason why it's hurtful is the backup to Anderson is a Diop, and he had to play a lot last year when Tosin wasn't able to play. We saw what happened in the first half of the season for Fulham when Diop was playing. It wasn't good, and Diop actually gets their own goal to make it 3-1. Villa closed out the game with Rogers plays a quick ball to Ramsey, and then Ramsey waits for Digna to overlap, making a run out in the wing, and then Digna has a square ball towards the goalie, and before Leno can dive to stop it, Diop basically gets a touch, and it goes in for an own goal. It's not necessarily his fault. Probably comes in cold, so you can give him a little bit of a leeway, but he's not Anderson. And then Philogene basically picked up a second yellow, so he's going to miss the next game for them too after coming on for the bench. Yeah, Villa able to strike back, and not maybe the best result versus Man United, but they were missing a couple guys. They got a couple guys back in Ramsey. Onana was able to start this game and was able to come on back in. They didn't have Onana either. And with Fulham, it was a big chance for them to make a really big statement. And it's still, I think it's they're leading. It was it really was an even game until the red card happened. But it is what it is. They're finally coming into the form. Jimenez has the big goal versus the U.S. and he scores again here. He's had an unbelievable month to his season. They were very impressive versus Man City, despite losing that game as well. So they had a moment to really kind of build some momentum there, and I think the Anderson Red's going to actually stall them a little bit. It's not the end of the world, but it prevents them from being able to to get a couple wins in a row to build a lot of momentum. Marco Silva, to start the year going into the international break, is up there in like the third or fourth in the table for expected points. His side has been balling. So it is unfortunate. The reason why they've been balling is they've got Anderson and Calvin Bassey are very good, very balanced, very, very good. center back pairing. They've lost Tosin Adebayo, and they've picked out Anderson from Crystal Palace. And Anderson's very good with the ball at his feet. He usually can defend, people making runs in behind him, but Ollie Watkins is a different breed. To be honest, to be fair to him. Um, they're missing him. They are going to miss him. And the other thing to say is, maybe Fulham got a little too cute because they went back to trying Andres Pereira with Eero Smith Rowe playing at the same time. I feel like it's a little bit like Spurs and Madison and Kulishevsky. It's like both are tens, both are kind of, it should be one or the other. I feel like instead of Pereira, maybe, uh, uh, maybe it'd be Lukic if Lukic isn't available. You have Tom Carney? You have Tom Carney. I feel like him and maybe Berger, it makes a little bit more sense. Maybe it makes it a little bit more defensively secure. But you can't. They were in the game until that. They give up a corner kick. Give a goal on the corner kick, and then the red card. So it's not the end of the world. I think for either teams. 4 big chances for Fulham as well. 10 shots for them, 4 on target, 14 for Villa, and 5. And Villa just continues to have an unbelievable start to their season because they end up winning again in the Champions League. And I think it's them and Liverpool that are number 1 and 2 for the Champions League table. They just continue to win as well. I think John Duran finally got a start and finally did score on his start. But John Duran continues to be in goal scoring form. We didn't really see Duran here, but he made his mark in the midweek. So you mentioned how no John Duran, but you didn't need John Duran because Ollie Watkins is back firing. Morgan Rogers also player of the match. Now he had a couple moments with Man United and didn't take them, but he's kind of he offers you a different kind of equation too, because I think they said he's like 6'1", 6'2". He's a big body on him. He's good with the ball at his feet, but he's so direct when he gets the ball. He gets it, he wants to drive with it. And then when Watkins makes runs off him or makes runs ahead of him, what do you do if you're a defender? Because you can't really charge at him, so you're going to retreat a little bit as you're following Watkins, especially. And then as Morgan Rogers gets closer and closer to goal, he's got a shot on him, and as well. Also, Jacob Ramsey back fit. He's got the directness to his game. He makes selfless runs as well. They've been missing him. Lots of positive for Aston Villa. Also, Digna comes in, wins the game because of the way that Villa are able to play fullbacks. They're not afraid of just playing everyone defensively or trying to do this inverted stuff. They actually like using the width with their fullbacks. Weird concept, I know. And then we get with Fulham. Not much to really talk about. I still think there's a lot of praise. There's a lot of reasons for them to like how they started the season. I think they're about to have a little bit of a setback, but once they get Anderson back, I think you'll be fine again. And then Newcastle and Brighton. Brighton win. They kind of the surprise of a weekend as well because Newcastle get Alexander Isak back. You look at the back line for Brighton, and the Brighton have just come back from the game versus Spurs. So 2 big wins back to back for Brighton. Brighton had actually had an unbelievable start to their season as well. But again, you look at that back line, you still see Dunk, you still see Veltman. You look at Gordon being able to take Veltman on, and Gordon was actually ripping him left and right. And you have Alexander Isak back, and you figured this probably would have been an easy game for Newcastle with the kind of attacking power that they have, the way that their midfield is quite good at finding their attackers as well with Tonali and Bruno. Even Joe Linton. Joe Linton's got some playmaking ability as well, and Newcastle probably did do enough to win this game comfortably, and they just weren't able to make their chances. I think it's a case where if Ishak had been kind of informed coming into this and not just returning from injury, sometimes you have rust when you do get your first game back. And Alexander Isak did have a couple chances where he either whiffed on a cross that was just right at him, and then he had a 1v1 where you can credit the keeper, for Bregan for coming out, but you figured, a different kind of form, maybe he would have, put that away. And then Gordon was also in 1v1 in the second half and wasn't able to beat the keeper either. But Brighton, despite being completely outplayed for I don't know, first 30 minutes into the game, it felt like maybe Brighton didn't even have a touch in the opponent's final third or penalty area. It was straight domination to start this game. They get a free kick and a ball over the top. and they were able to get, I think it's Jorginho, Rudder, or it's even Welbeck. Welbeck maybe gets the ball and he passes it to Rudder, and then Welbeck does a little bit of a back shoulder, like, kind of spin to go around, I believe it's Dan Burn, and, or maybe it's even Fabian Schär, and then they and behold, a really nice feed by Jorginho Rudder here, and Welbeck's in behind, and he's able to do what Isak could not do. He's able to find the net with a really nice finish, and they're able to hold on with that. Uh, the other kind of note to talk about is after scoring in the second half, Welbeck apparently got injured a little bit with the back and had to actually be stretchered off. So that's not really great to see because he had really been coming into a form, one of the best kind of starts to his seasons, maybe ever. Uh, so unfortunate for Brighton, but we'll have to follow that. Hopefully, it's not really anything big. But this and I mentioned how it started with Newcastle, but really is a story of Brighton. To start the season, no one knew what Brighton were going to be with this new coach that they got from St. Pauli. A tier two in the Bundesliga. You talk about some clubs not wanting to take risk with the hiring that they do. Uh, Brighton are not that. Brighton took a shot on De Zerbi, and they took a shot on Fabian Hortze, and all he's done is got Brighton into sixth or seventh into the league to start their season. And y- the way that they're able to bounce back, losing to Spurs, and then they come here. Now they were thoroughly outplayed, but a win's a win. Basically, they also came into this with kind of a weird lineup. No Matoma to start. They didn't really have wingers. They didn't have Menta. Uh, it was like a front three of Evan Ferguson, which we hadn't seen until today. Uh, Welbeck, and then it was like Jorginho Rudder on the kind of on the wing side, and then it was like Yassine Ayori on the other side. It was almost like a 4-2-2-2 with Henselwood and Baliba as kind of the midfielders. And it did not work out at all. They did not have any kind of control in the game. They couldn't go long. They couldn't really get anyone free. It was just utter domination the way that Newcastle were playing, and Newcastle were very, very good, and they just have to hate how this ended with a loss. There was a lot of talk coming into this with Eddie Howe. Eddie Howe, should have been given more consideration for the England job. Apparently, wasn't even interviewed. That was a story coming into this as well. And then people were pointing at, well, Eddie Howe is a loser. He's not even able to win the game. So I don't necessarily think that's fair. But one thing I can say is they need to figure out a way to get past Dan Burn because Dan Burn hurts them in too many games. Other than that, we did see something different. To be no Trippier as well. So maybe instead of Livermento, maybe Trippier would have led to maybe a better final third ball. But the starting 11, I don't really know what their depth is like. I don't really love Willock or Joe Willock coming in. I don't really get where Harvey Barnes maybe features. Harvey Barnes is kind of it's a bit like Jota in a respect where for Liverpool where Harvey Barnes maybe is a better finisher, pure finisher than Gordon, but Gordon's maybe a little bit better kind of a 1v1. But when you need goals, Harvey Barnes maybe offers you a little bit more kind of shot power because Newcastle have missed a lot of chances this year, and they've gotten a lot of goals from Harvey Barnes, either off the bench or starting. But where do you play Gordon in that respect? But do you play Gordon on the right? Do you sacrifice him? Maybe not play Jacob Murphy. We'll have to see what Eddie Howe does there. But one thing I want to talk about is the reason why this was such domination is Fabian Schär, Burn, and Lewis Hall kind of made a back three to start the kind of early phase buildup. And Tonali, Bruno, and Joe Linton are all very good at showing for the ball and then turning and doing something with it. Very, very good technically, very good physically as well, physically dominant. And they were able to smother Brighton in duels and possessions, and they're just able to press really high. Uh, all Brighton were doing was just forced to go long, and they were not able to win any of those battles. It was just constant pressure. I think I saw there was a stat for like the first 20 minutes in the game is possession was like 85 or 88% Newcastle's favor. I really loved what I saw with the way that Lewis Hall was getting on the ball and helping out. He's a young he's a young player that maybe England should look at as far as future fullback spot for England. We'll see if Tuchel maybe goes that way. Tuchel being a Chelsea manager at one point. I don't necessarily know if Lewis Hall was coming in at that point or not because before he's at Newcastle, he was at Chelsea. But I think he's going to be someone to maybe watch going forward because I really liked what I saw from him. Newcastle did enough to do more than they did. So I don't think it's the end of the world. 26 shots, 6 on target. Lots of majority of the ball. Brighton defended well. They've defended in a shell and forced to defend, but they did defend it well. I thought they're a little bit better in the second half when they did bring Matoma in, so it was weird not to see him start. Maybe they did it because of international travel, him having to play in Asia and then coming back on a plane. Maybe his legs were tired. There is possible that that was kind of the reason why. But they didn't have any wingers. They didn't have any really 1v1 creation. Fullbacks weren't able to really do much. Veltman was getting hooked or left and right the way that Anthony Gordon was taking him on. So it was just kind of hope and pray kind of moment for Brighton, but they were able to do it. So, and again, I just think it's they're a little bit different. I don't feel like this is the kind of result that the Zerbi team would have gotten. Not having that less of the ball. So it's not nearly the possession dominant team that we've seen, but maybe a little bit more, maybe a different side than we've seen. I still do think the fullback and center back issues it kind of limit this team a little bit like Newcastle. They kind of marry each other a little bit. Very front loaded and as far as attacking options, a little bit weak at the back. And then with Newcastle. Yeah, I mentioned how where do you fit Harvey Barnes in. Um, Gordon and Isak are going to be better, going forward. I think Isak will probably score in his next game. He just, he gets into such good opportunities. I've already mentioned it before. He's kind of, as far as the 1v1, when someone's in on goal, I feel like it's either Holland or I think you can normally trust Alexander Isak as far as like in those situations. So it's a little bit surprising there. But again, I just think it's down to Russ when he's healthy and he's able to go. He is as good of a striker as really anyone in the league, maybe outside of Holland. So I think Newcastle will be fine there. And then we end with, or we get to Southampton and Leicester. I wanted to speak a little bit more on this, but I've spent way too much time talking about Liverpool and Chelsea. So my bad. This was the quote unquote 6-pointer. And maybe it's even more than that because Southampton were leading but with 2 goals. First with Archer and Aribo. This comes from Southampton actually doing well to get the ball in the wings. Kyle Walker-Peters actually has a role in both of these goals. The first one, it's after a quick free kick taken. He's able to dribble out, and then he has, I think it's Dan O'Mannon who makes a run out in the wing, and it's just a nice little square ball into the box that finds Cam Archer making a run behind Ralph Fies, who's able to get it in. Good for Archer to score as well. And then Aribo, kind of a similar goal where Kyle Walker-Peters was able to take on, I think it's James Justin, gets by him, and then he has a nice little ball into the box, like 6-yard area, where Aribo is there to tap it in. Leicester did not really do anything in that first half. Maybe they had 5 shots, but really nothing on goal. Uh, Southampton had a couple moments to actually get the third, probably win the game. So the Leicester keeper was forced into some pretty nice saves again. Probably the biggest save he made was when courtesy of his own defender and Ralph Faes, who had a brilliant kind of defensive-minded header that would have been a pretty nice goal had it gone in. It was one of those diving headers going towards goal, and it was right at the goal. But Hermansen was able to save that. So you get to it's 2-0. It's still but they weren't able to get that third. And a couple of things happened where Leicester started pressing a little bit higher. It felt like maybe they were taking a little bit more chances, more risk, and Southampton started to actually be a little bit more loose with the ball because we know that with Southampton. They like playing out the back. They like taking chances, but sometimes they're not really good at enough at doing that. And eventually, if a team is prone to mistakes doing that, eh, a mistake is going to happen. And basically, a couple of moments do happen where they do. Leicester are able to win the ball up quickly. I think they find Brunette is able to get on the ball. He plays in Vardy. Vardy actually has a moment to actually go for goal. He ends up kind of delaying it a little bit, and I think there's a big block that ends up stopping it. And then Brunette gets on the ball a couple minutes after that, where he's able to cut inside, and he has a great hit that just barely misses. So Leicester is finally starting to grow into the game a little bit, and then Steve Cooper makes his changes. He brings on Fatua for I forget who actually ended up coming off. Oh, it's Christensen. It's the fullback. So he moves James Justin from right back to left back to play this attack minded kind of wing player to be at right back, and then that coincided with with Southampton or what Russell Martin did. So Sugawara ends up getting hurt. I don't know if it was fitness or not. Similar to like Matoma, like I mentioned. I don't necessarily know if he was asked to do international duty or not, but if he was, it's a long plane ride back. So maybe he had some tightness or some tiredness. I don't know, but he asked to go off. And instead of doing Charlie Taylor, what they did is they moved Kyle Walker Peters from one side to the other, and they brought in Ryan Frazier. And it was hard to see what kind of formation they were actually playing, but I feel like Ryan Frazier was basically playing wingback. He wasn't really just an attacker. So in that situation, Ryan Frazier was asked to do the defending versus the attack minded player in Fatawa and Fatawu, and he couldn't do it. So the first goal comes for Burnett for Leicester with Burnett. Burnett has kind of been their kind of relying player, a reliable player to start this campaign. He's probably been the number one goal scorer. He just scored versus Bournemouth even before the international break, and here uh, Fadawawu is able to just school. Just to dribble past Ryan Frazier without him even getting a glove on him, and there's no really help either from I think Daniel Manning, and cutback ball in across the box, and Burnett is able to get on the wrong side of the defender. I think the defender is Flynn Downs. So 2-1, they get back into the game, and then there's a moment where Fadawa is able to. He cuts inside. He has an unbelievable hit from outside the box. Uh, with his I don't know if it's his weak foot or not, but it's with his left foot. And man, does he catch this really really well. It's unlucky he doesn't even actually get it to go in, but it smacks the crossbar, or, the post, and Leicester are able to continue to keep possession high up, and they recycle it, and then eventually there's a cross that actually comes into the back post that Baduawu always also makes a run in. And Ramsdale actually makes a pretty good save, but it doesn't do enough, and the ball does get behind him, and James Vardy is basically there for a tap in, and basically Ryan Frazier pulls his shirt and brings him down, being a red card. And the reason to touch on this is right before this, I'm kind of getting a little ahead of myself, but right before that, Southampton did have a corner kick, and someone that they had just brought on, Paul Onachu, also was in the box and also was having his shirt pulled in a similar kind of manner. Now it's on a corner kick, but he's also like 6'8", 6'7", 6'7". He's really big. He's going to be able to challenge any kind of ball that's just somewhat near the goal. And I forget who it was. It might have been Jordan Ayew who had also just come on. He's got a lot of his shirt, and he's pulling really really hard. And they allowed that to kind of go. But here, for Leicester's sake, they weren't able. Ryan Frazier wasn't able to get away doing the same thing. Now you can say that Ryan Frazier is basically denying an absolute open goal, scoring opportunity for Leicester. So you understand why it was given, but Southampton fans probably do have a little bit a reason to gripe about that. But after that, it was kind of over. Vardy is able to make the PK. And then at the very end, Fatua again was able to drive, is able to create a very late corner kick, and basically they score on the corner kick where the first time ball was able to find it might be Bernete or I forget who actually has it might be Harry Wanks. First time ball was able to find IU kind of open, top of the box, similar a little bit to what Bournemouth did with Arsenal. At least there's an open man because the down a man, and they're able to make that extra man count with IU being able to find the corner past Ramsdale. Ramsdale maybe sees it late, but I still feel like he could maybe do better with the save. So Leicester win 3-2. Southampton, this is one of those games where, because it's on the back of the Arsenal game as well, it's going to be really hard for them to get their minds right. Uh, it is crushing. And the only thing I'll say about with Southampton to kind of start with them is it's another game where Leslie Ukachukwu is not played, and I don't understand why. Adam Lallana again on the bench and not played. Maybe the red card kind of hurts you a little bit, and you don't know what to do. But at least those players, in my opinion, give you a little bit more than what we've seen so far with Orebo or with Flynn Downs. So a little bit surprising there. They've been missing kind of a Cam Archer has been able to help them with a couple goals here and there the last couple of games for them, so that's positive. But at the same time, he's a guy that runs into channels. He's not going to be someone to hold on to the ball and link up. So now Paul Awoniyi, if nothing else, he's such a big body. Maybe you should actually start him now that he's available. He did come on in the second half before the red card. And then, they just brought in a Kamaline Sulemana. So we'll see if we actually get more of him. I remember before Southampton was relegated 2 years ago, he actually was someone that was, catching my eye. So we'll see if we see a little some of him. They still have Dibbling, that actually looks pretty good any kind of game he plays in. So it's not the end of the world, but this is heartbreaking a little bit. Also, the shape's a little bit weird, and the shape just crumbled when Sugawara had to go out. So a little bit of a lesson for Russell Martin and the coach. You don't feel like it was maybe deserved. I mean, the XG was 2, and Leicester had over 3. It's also really crushing because you're losing points to a team that you expect to also be, someone that you're fighting for relegation with Leicester. And I feel like watching the way the game played out before the red card, I did feel like Southampton were a better team. Now that said, once the changes were made and Leicester had Fadawawu on, I couldn't say that even before the red card. And that gets back to Leicester. I don't understand why Steve Cooper hasn't gotten him get played more. It was a bold risk goal to play him at right back because you got Frazier in behind. It could have been vulnerable a little bit on the counter, but this is a guy that looked unbelievable in the first game for Spurs. Actually, had the lone assist to Jamie Vardy. Um, he had won something like 12 duels in that opening game, and we haven't seen him since. I don't know if it's been uh, game management. Maybe because he's a young player, but I just feel like you need to play him more. Matt Valididi on one side, you got him on the other, and you got Vardy to still make your runs in channels. That's at least something to play with, and you can play Brunette a little bit more in kind of a number 10 role than necessarily asking him to play out wide. Uh, that to me makes you a little bit more dangerous than you've been, but I don't know. We'll have to see. I mean, still they're able to, control the game after the red card, so that's something at least. Both teams are trying to, play from the back. It's not just all going long. Um, but it still feels like all three actually of the promoter sides are really struggling so far. Now Leicester are the ones that's actually won a couple games now. They've won 2 back to back, but I still don't know how much I really trust this. But I've been a hater of Steve Cooper for a while now, so maybe that's just me being a little bit biased. And then Ipswich and Everton. Everton do win 2-0. Again, poor for Ipswich again. It feels like that game with Aston Villa feels like a month or 2 months ago when they were able to get a draw and have a couple vibes go their way. Just this on the back of what they did was West Ham. It's not positive. You lose here on an Ndiaye kind of nice hit from the corner, but you probably shouldn't have let him get free on that. It's just kind of a ball into the box you weren't able to clear. And then Michael Keane as well. I think it's on a corner kick or free kick where they're able to recycle as well. And you're not expecting Michael Keane, as the center back to have that kind of a hit. So that you can understand, but they weren't able to really get going at all. I think Delap finally had a shot towards the end of the second half, or like 70 minutes into the second half. They weren't able to really get him going. Now they did have more of the ball, but Leicester or Everton kind of had him where they wanted him. Didn't have a lot of the ball, but when they were able to get ahead, they had 11 shots and 8 on target. So they were making Muric have to work a little bit, and it was just a case of Sean Dyche kind of finding a way. He kind of does that every single year. Getting a one goal from center back, why not? Michael Keane can't really defend, but maybe he can help out in your attack to kind of be a little cheeky. And Ndiaye has come in and already had a giant impact at helping their effort to stay up. He's been. I was talking with my friend. He was wondering if he's maybe been the signing of the year because there haven't been a whole lot of people that have hit the ground running. You could say maybe Calafiori of Arsenal, but Ndiaye has come in and really had a nice start to his EPL career since joining Everton, helping out with some pretty big goals in a side that has lacked and needed goals. So we'll see if that continues as well. Calvert-Lewin is able to just continue to play for them, and that is just something worth celebrating for Everton fans as well. And he did have a 1v1 chance he wasn't able to convert, but again, he continues to be able to fit fitness wise, and he continues to be able to make runs into channels and to help them out that way. The Everton midfield actually felt like, regardless of being out possessed, I thought they actually got the better of Calvin Phillips and Morrissey. So kind of one of those cases where this is a side that you expect to maybe struggle or at least kind of be where where the level is, where uh, 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 yeah, I guess level would be the way to put it. Like if you're Ipswich side, this is a way to judge where you are right now in the pecking order, because you have to win this game if you're going to stay up, in my opinion, or at least you have to do a little bit better than you did. You know, they got some attacking threats with Delap and Hutchinson, but it's just not necessarily enough. And then Crystal Palace did go on to beat Nottingham, or did go on to lose to Nottingham Forest 1-0 with Chris Wood. Both teams had 20 shots apiece. This was very entertaining, end to end kind of game. Crystal Palace are kind of in an zone as well, but I feel like as long as they don't get eh, they don't make a move with Glasner, I think they will be okay. Not really ton to talk about here. Nottingham Forest did not have Morgan Gibbs White, but with that comes with an opportunity, and Elliot Anderson took that opportunity. He had a couple really nice, just individual plays that really did just unlock Crystal Palace a little bit. Crystal Palace came in without trying a different lineup themselves. We saw Eddie Nketiah and Eze kind of played as like a front two, and then you have Munoz, Kamada, Will Hughes, and Mitchell with Lermer kind of a lone man, in between, and then you have Chalobah, Maxence, and Gahey, and Chalobah kind of has the little bit of mistake that he kind of heads it right to Chris Wood, and Chris Wood just takes it off the volley. Uh, I think if you look at this, Crystal Palace maybe, uh, you know, they've lost Sam Johnson to bring in Dean Henderson. Dean Henderson maybe could have done better. But I think everyone's going to talk about them missing Elise, and yes, that's a big issue. Because I mentioned it after the Liverpool game or 2 weeks ago. You can focus on Eze now because Eze is kind of the only one that's really going to create for you. And Katie is someone that's going to get the ball. He's going to take a shot. He's got a pretty good shot on him. Eze got a pretty good shot on him as well. He was able to force Matt Sells into pretty good a number of saves. I think Matt Sells was actually named player of the match, the keeper. So that kind of says where Crystal Palace was. The game easily could have ended 1-1. Maybe Crystal Palace could have even won the game. Uh, but it's not the same team, and why is that? So they've lost Elise. They've also lost Anderson. And I think Anderson actually is a pretty big miss as well as Elise. And maybe eventually it'll work out. Maxence and Gahey and Chalobah will work out together. They're also missing Chris Richards, but I feel like missing Anderson is more of the bigger issue. And it just through the middle. Apparently, Adam Wharton has suffered from some groin tightness. I think they said so. He hasn't been able to get going for them. They're missing Decore since returning from injury. Apparently, he's out again. Decore helped them actually beat Chelsea, and they're missing Mateta. They're not really able to get him going. And Mateta had a long Olympics spell, and maybe that kind of got to his legs. Maybe he hasn't returned fit. You're trying to in KD, it's Oliver Glasner is trying to do different things, and it's not really working for them. And I kind of feel a little bit bad for him. But I hope if the ownership is patient, this will be fine. But we'll have to see how patient they are because they have not gotten off to the season that they probably would have expected. And that is where we end this week's episode. We did go a little long, so sorry for that. Thank you for tuning in, and until then, just stay squatting and stop recording.